5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
I should settle for first place, of course. Anybody that had settled for less is crackers.
Across from Price, Stapleton. Oh, Rice in there. Oh, Brady got it beautifully. Smith. It's a goal for Arsenal. Alan Smith, a super strike for the Gunners. Of Arsenal looking more positive in these early minutes of the second half. Ball back. Well, it's an exquisite goal from a player who is really in peak form at the moment. The final season at Roker Park. There won't have been many better goals scored down the years on this ground. And the one that Dennis Bergkamp here for Arsenal. Good ball by Tottenham.
Right, hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, and I'm absolutely delighted and honoured to have the one and only, the legend that is Mr. Mani Thangaduri here with me today. He appears on lots of different podcasts and YouTube channels, and he's got an Instagram account, and he also gets involved in debates on Twitter and the new one, I think, Threads, isn't it, Manny?
It is Threads, and thankfully there are no real debates to be had there. It's a lot nicer and more calmer. But Twitter is where it's at, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Warren, because there was actually a debate in which I just got involved, and I don't want to talk about that now because that will sort of defeat the purpose of our little session together. But I will tell you about it later on, and you are really going to have a field day with that.
Oh dear, that doesn't sound very good. But yeah, listen, I'm really delighted to have Manny here with me today, and we're going to be talking about his life as a football fan. So first thing I want to do is ask Manny to just give us a quick rundown about what he does in social media world, and all about his activities there before we actually get into the actual chit chat that we're going to have. Is that okay, Manny? Do you want to just tell people about what you get up to and whatnot?
Definitely. Thank you very much indeed, Warren. First of all, hello everyone, and thank you all for tuning in. It's wonderful to work with Warren whenever I can. I actually was on a stream with him and several other fine panelists when we had the discussion for the All Ireland team. A bit ironic given that I was born and brought up in England, but I've always enjoyed watching the Irish team whenever I could, and I'm going to sort of talk about that even further once I get into it. And I got involved in this whole YouTube podcast business through, basically through Del Boy, but also I want to have a huge shout out to David Cole, the old school gunner. He was actually the one who introduced me to Del Boy, and ever since coming on Del Boy's channel and getting to meet Warren and Jez and Darren Sullivan and other people through that platform, it's been amazing. And I would say that it's done a lot for me in terms of providing me a community of like-minded people. And I get a chance to explore a different side of me, one which is a little bit more articulate, a little bit more expressive. I wouldn't go so far as to say knowledgeable, because I'm in the company of people who have more knowledge in their little finger than I possibly ever could. But to bounce ideas off them and to be, talking with them, it always makes me happy. And I always believe that, especially when people are a lot older than me, um, I have to treat them the way I would expect to be treated, which is why for quite some time I used to refer to Warren and other people as Sir, out of respect for his age and experience. And of course, not too long ago, he asked me to stop doing that. So out of respect for him, I don't do that much anymore. And
I don't deserve the title, sir, mate, but go on, sorry.
Yeah. And I suppose, given that you're not a royalist, it wouldn't sit well with you anyway. But that's another story.
No.
Yeah, but obviously I do a lot of work on YouTube, and my social media doesn't feature too much in terms of sporting related posts, but you can check out some content in my stories related to sports and politics and other personal stuff. Away from YouTube and social media, I'm also quite active in trying to learn German and also trying to secure some employment back in Europe or back home in the UK. I consider the UK to be home because it's where my heart is. I just lay my hat over here, but it's not my home, as the song would say. And I think that'll sort of lead me in some ways to the question that Warren might ask me about my football life, and I'll hand it back to you, Warren.
Right, okay, Manny. Well, thanks very much for telling us all where we can find you. We will talk about that several times during the course of the show, just to sort of ram home the importance of people following you, really, because I do think it's really important that people go out and they try and get lots of different perspectives on what it is that their chosen subject matter is that they want to watch on YouTube, whatever the subject is, not just football, all sorts of different things. So, and as you can see on the banner that I've got going across the screen, it says, gives you Manny's handle, username, profile name, whatever you want to call it, on Instagram, so you can find him there. And like he said, he's on Twitter, and he's also on the new one. I can't remember what it's called. That's it, Threads. And he appears on lots of different YouTube channels, which is really great. It's really good that he's getting himself out there. So, Manny, the first question I've got for you, I just wanted if you could tell us where you were born and where you grew up.
Interesting story indeed. I was born in Eastbourne on the southeast coast of England, not too far from Southampton. But Dad, being a doctor, he was obviously... He had completed his DLO, which is his diploma in laryngology, from London. And this was, of course, after having finished medical school back in India, where he is, of course, originally from. He was born and brought up there. But he came to England in 1979 along with my mum, not long after they got married, to try and forge a life and try and forge a career there. And I was only in Eastbourne for about a year or so before moving up to Chesterfield, where my first sister was born. And we stayed there for, I think, about 3 or 4 years, or maybe even 5, before moving down to Hillingdon in Middlesex, where my second sister was born. And I stayed there for about a year. But the most vivid memories I have of my childhood are in Kent, where I grew up in Dartford. Quite famous, of course, for being the birthplace of Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. But unlike those two gentlemen, I can get my satisfaction quite easily. A little joke I had to throw in there, and I always do that whenever people ask me, where I grew up. And
you wouldn't
I always
get much satisfaction living in Dartford, mate. Let me tell you, I know Dartford really well, but go on, sorry.
Yeah, I know you live in Kent right now, and obviously another of my close, my childhood friends has long since moved on from there. She went to live in Darrenth and now is in Ebbsfleet, of all places. I'm not going to divulge the exact location, but
No,
I mean,
I don't
nobody knows.
Oh,
no, nobody's knows those years anyway. But it was a decent childhood growing up, and I would say that my most vivid memories are, of course, heading to school in Dartford, and obviously enjoying fun in the classroom, playing some football with some classmates and other schoolmates, and really getting involved in the game. Maybe not so much away from school in terms of playing for a school team, because I never really had that much in terms of ability. But I always like to try whatever skills I had. A vivid memory I do have was when I was playing in defense, which I absolutely hated. I somehow managed to swing my big right tree trunk of a leg and somehow kick the ball quite high and quite long all the way into the opposing team's goal. That was a memorable goal I scored, and a lot of people really enjoyed watching that. But I always fancied myself as more of a goalkeeper, and I sort of idolized a certain Arsenal goalkeeper by the name of David Andrew Seaman, who joined the club in 1990 and left in 2003, winning 9 trophies along the way. And that's sort of a segue into how I started watching football, because I really started getting involved in getting engrossed in the game, not involved, but engrossed really in the summer of 1990, because when I was young, much younger, I do remember enjoying watching my usual cartoons and other, programs, children's programs, really. But I never really got into football that much until sometime in 1990. And I remember there would be advertisements on the television for, matches being shown on ITV on a Sunday afternoon, while on Saturdays, of course, as you will know, Warren, we had to depend on. It's a little bit like, your Saturday match day programs, where you have these live alerts on the BBC's grandstand, and people talk about some of the games that would be playing then and what would happen. But usually on Sundays, it would just be ITV that would show one game, and I'd get to listen to, Brian Moore at his very best. Occasionally, of course, on grandstand, we'd see some FA Cup games and have the pleasure of listening to either John Motson or Barry Davies. And so when people talk about how the likes of Martin Tyler were just great commentators, I just tell them, no, you got to listen to Brian Moore, John Motson, Barry Davies, and a few others, and then you'll see just how great they were. And I think it was in 1990, though, that I really got engrossed in football when the World Cup was taking place. Because when the World Cup was happening in 1986 in, I believe it was Mexico, I was only 5 years old at the time, and I was never really watching the telly that much. It was in 1990 in Italy when things started to happen. And of course, at that time, ITV probably had the better coverage than BBC, in my opinion, because that theme song is still stuck in my head. I keep playing that on a loop. Tutti al Mondo, terrific stuff. And of course, we had the likes of Elton Wellesby, Jim Rosenthal and company doing their bit. And of course, I couldn't forget Ian St. John and Jimmy Greaves, God rest their souls, Saint and Greavesy, those fine characters. And I remember watching England play in some of the early, maybe not so much all of the early stage games, but when they qualified, I think for the latter stages, I started to really get engrossed, because the prospect of my nation of birth going a long way in that tournament, it would have been absolutely wonderful, especially since we hadn't, won any major tournament other than the 1966 World Cup. And obviously I wasn't born then. Dad was, but he actually played football when he was in medical school back in India. I mean, here in India, rather. And as a youngster, he was always a pretty good sportsman, but football was his first love. He fancied himself as more of a defender, sort of, stocky in the mold of a Martin Keown, if you will. And he would always criticize me for wanting to be a goalkeeper, calling it one of the laziest positions in the team. Little did he know that in order to be a goalkeeper, you've got to be exceptionally quick. You've got to have fine reflexes, sharp movements, and quick judgments. And when David Seaman joined Arsenal and I started watching him play, I started to, really idolize him. But the reason why I'm going to talk about England and Italia 90 was because I remember watching them play against the Cameroon team that had shocked the world, obviously, when they beat Argentina and qualified for the latter stages at the almost at Argentina's expense. They shocked Colombia, I believe it was in the second round, and then played us in the quarterfinals. They took a 2-1 lead, and had they gone on to win, I would have been absolutely heartbroken. But fortunately enough, Gary Lineker stepped up with a penalty to take it to extra time, and another one to win it after David Platt put us ahead, of course. And I do remember Gascoigne very well, and obviously Gazamania had started to become a big thing. And I also vividly remember watching the semi-final in Turin, and we were absolutely immense in that game, playing them off the park. Obviously, when Bremer scored that free kick, and Andres Bremer scored that free kick, which hit Paul Parker and looped over Peter Shilton, I had my heart in my mouth, and only for the legend that is Lineker to come up and whip one right into the corner past Bodo Illner. And that gave me a lot of hope. And then seeing Chris Waddle hit the post in extra time, oh my goodness. And then going into penalties, I knew that there could only be one winner and one loser. And I distinctly remember watching Lineker, Beardsley, and Platt score their penalties, but the Germans replying, with precision, and Shilton not being able to make a save. Then Stuart Pearce came in and swung his big left tree trunk and sort of saw it get blocked by Illner. And then Chris Waddle, who was about to leave for France after the tournament, had to score, but then he blasted it over the bar. Cue the waterworks, as they say. I literally broke down in tears, and my first sister, who was with me, also started crying, uncontrollably. Not necessarily because she was a big fan of England, but because, she was caught up in the whole thing. And, my dad was telling me, son, get it together. It's just a game. How could you be so emotional about things like this? And ironically, whenever there's a cricket match with India playing, he'd be the type of person to get quite, animated about that too. Especially whenever India and England play, I'd be cheering for England. He'd cheer for India. And whenever something would happen, like, Kevin Peterson hitting a bowler for 6, or James Anderson getting one of the Indian batsmen out, I'd cheer loudly, and he'd say, "You traitor, get out of my house," as a joke more than anything else. But that day when he tried to tell me to pull myself together, he just couldn't really understand how much it meant. And the same thing happened, of course, in the 1991 rugby final when England played Australia at Twickenham, and Nick Farr-Jones's boys ended up taking a lead through, I believe it was Michael Liner who scored that try. And then I was feeling so miserable. And then he told me that you won't get to watch the rest of the match. Go up. And it was a bit harsh, really, because as someone who, loved sport, enjoyed playing sports as much as I did, I don't think he really enjoyed watching sports that much. But maybe it was because he was working quite hard. He was a doctor, of course, in the NHS, and it wasn't easy back then, because for his qualifications, he deserved a consultancy and couldn't get it. But obviously, he understood that at heart, I was mad about sports. I enjoyed playing sports whenever I could, even if when it came to the exercises, I wasn't really the most keen. But I did enjoy watching it and talking about it with whether it was with my mates at school or otherwise. And so it was after the Italian 90s I started getting engrossed in football. But this is something which is a huge revelation, and I'm going to disclose this to you before anyone else. And it's going to be live, and people are going to know the truth, but I'm going to say this right now. For me, I never knew much about the club rivalries that existed. I never knew that Arsenal and Tottenham were very big North London rivals. But it was basically based on Italia 90 that I started to follow, footballers on an individual basis. I knew that David Platt played for Aston Villa, and Lineker and Gascoigne were heavily a part of Spurs. And sadly, Arsenal didn't have that much representation at Italia 90. I think Adams didn't make the squad, and Seaman was in the squad, but he got injured. There was no place for Rocastle because he ended up being ignored in favour of Gascoigne. And there was no place for Dixon Winterburn because Paul Parker, Gary Stevens, and Stuart Pearce were preferred ahead of them. But I remember, Lineker and Gascoigne and watching Spurs play Liverpool, I think, at White Hart Lane. And that Liverpool team had, of course, Rush, Barnes, and Beardsley. I know that Rush was a Welshman, still is a Welshman, but I remember seeing Liverpool beat Spurs 3-1 and feeling a little bit sad because I loved watching Gazza and Lineker at Italia 90. But then one of the first Arsenal game I saw was when they played Liverpool at Highbury, and that, of course, was a team which that was my first my first opportunity watching them play. Seaman in goal, and then the usual back four of Adams, Winterburn, Dixon, and I believe it was Bald who was in the team that day. I don't think O'Leary was there because by that time he was sort of being phased out of the team. And then, of course, we had Alan Smith, goal poacher supreme, Magic Man Merson in the midfield, Anders Limpar. And I remember it was midway through the first half that Merson got the first goal, the ball going over the line, and that was all that counted. And then Lee Dixon scoring a penalty, I believe, in the second half, and then Alan Smith, Smudger, as they called him, rounding things off. And that was when I told myself, this is a team which I really enjoy watching because they were solid defensively, but they also had the ability to turn on the style whenever they wanted. And that was sort of the way Arsenal were at the time under George Graham, because they believed that if you want to build from the back, you've really got to have a strong back, as it were. And that back four, back five was obviously quite legendary that particular time. And it made me happy to see them beat Liverpool because obviously Liverpool were the team at the time, winning titles in England and in Europe, left, right, and centre, and sort of having this smug air about themselves. So I told myself, you know what? It's good to see Liverpool get beaten, and it's I was happy to watch Arsenal play, and I really enjoyed watching them play. And I also did keep an eye on Spurs, and I do remember the '91 FA Cup semi-final when we played Tottenham. And it was basically the Gazza and Gary show with Paul scoring that free kick, which beat Seaman at the top corner, and then Lineker poking a couple in, Alan Smith getting one in between. And basically, when it came to watching football, I did enjoy club football quite a bit, but international football was really when I got my excitement about it going up, because more than following any type of club team and having that sort of, tribalism, I loved watching England more because I considered myself, a proud Englishman and a proud England fan, and I loved seeing a group of people come together to try to earn some glory for the country, or at the very least not disgrace themselves. And sadly, the tournament I remember watching, the last tournament I watched when I was living in England, was Euro 92. Graham Taylor, of course, took his squad over there. It didn't have David Seaman in goal because actually Chris Woods was the number one then, and he took Nigel Martin as his backup. And that was also Gary Lineker's final international tournament. And I think I vividly remember watching the Sweden-England game. David Platt once again proving what a legend he was for England by putting us ahead once again. But then inexplicably, Lineker was taken off and Alan Smith was brought on. I enjoyed watching Alan Smith with Arsenal, but with England, I just didn't think he was able to quite, get it together. And then, of course, Sweden equalised. Thomas Brolin scored the winner, and the rest was history. We were dumped out once again. And then in the summer of 92, after Euro 92, we left England to move to Saudi Arabia in the Middle East. And that was a long time before this whole hoopla with the Saudi Pro League started. So I knew that I would never really be able to watch live football from the English First Division again, and all I could do was, depend on a Thursday afternoon show, which would be effectively a roundup of the action more than anything else. And we did get opportunities to watch international football whenever we could. I think for the '94 World Cup, for which England didn't qualify, I was in England for the first half of the tournament, but then we went to India as the second part of our holiday. And I miss some football coverage back in England, and ITV is always my go-to channel for that, more than the BBC. I guess because I found Des Lynam to be a little bit, staid in a way. But I like Bob Wilson. Don't get me wrong, but ITV just felt a little bit fresher in a way. And Euro '96, I remember watching in Saudi on these Arabic channels where the commentary would be in Arabic. And obviously, because it was international football, it was broadcast around the world, and other channels would be able to provide some coverage of their own. But the commentary obviously was in Arabic, so I couldn't understand much of it. But I do remember a few words, and I do remember watching England beating Spain in Euro '96 in the quarterfinals. Seaman becoming the hero then. And then for France '98, I remember watching the tournament back in Riyadh again, back in Saudi Arabia with Arabic commentary. And then I moved over here to India for the first time in 1999. So most of my international exposure would be on satellite television. But I never really got an opportunity much to watch football from the First Division. And so I had to depend on newspaper clippings. And even during the mid-90s, we never even had the internet either. And I was also still going to school, living with my mum and dad, and also my sisters. It was a case of not really having too much of an opportunity to follow Arsenal. So I had to depend on those newspaper clippings, and I missed out greatly on watching the '98 vintage play. I did see a little bit of the '94 team, which won the European Cup Winners' Cup, but again, that was also mainly on these football roundup shows where they showed some of the best bits, and it was wonderful to see them win against Parma in '94, but obviously 1995. I did see the highlights of that, and that was a huge heartbreaker for David Seaman. And I think it was really only at the beginning of the next century, starting from 2000 or 2001, I think, when I was living here in India, that satellite television started to show coverage of the English Premier League. And that was when I started to watch it all over again. I think 2000, 2001 was the season I did like watching. It was when I started again. And that obviously ended in disappointment with Arsenal once again not being able to win the league. But 2001, 2002 was one of my favorite seasons as an Arsenal fan to watch, because that team also could in some ways be compared to the '91 vintage, which almost went unbeaten the whole season. We had an excellent away record. We only lost 3 times at home, and winning the league at Old Trafford, watching Wiltord receive that rebound after that save from Fabian Barthez and poking it in, an absolutely wonderful memory. Of course, I had to put up with commentary from Martin Tyler and Andy Gray, and a lot of people rate them highly. Me, I have other preferences, as I told you. And ever since, those years, I've been able to watch a lot more in terms of football from the from the Premier League, and start following the team a lot more. And it's continued to this day whenever I've been able to, as long as I've had a television with a satellite dish, I've been able to watch it a lot more often. And the timings can be a bit of a problem, especially with the team playing in Europe. It would mean that an 8 o'clock game in the evening would start at either midnight during the summer here, or 1:30 in the morning over here when it isn't when British daylight savings time is no longer applied. So it would mean that I'd have to stay up until about maybe 3:30 or even later to watch them play. But on every single occasion, it would be worth it. And, Dad wasn't really around most of the time because he was still living in the Middle East, working and sending money to us so that we could continue to live. And he knew that I enjoyed my sports and I enjoyed my football, so he didn't mind too much, but he didn't want my academics to suffer. And of course, I was studying in university at the time. The less said about that, the better. I graduated eventually, and I ended up getting an opportunity to work for a bit. And then, of course, in 2013, I moved to the US. And even there as well, they had opportunities to screen Premier League games and other Arsenal games from other competitions in certain sports bars where I lived. And in America, it's about 5 hours behind UK time. So I could watch afternoon games either over breakfast or maybe at about, I want to say midday, no later than that. And if there are any games from Europe, it would be in the afternoon. And I'd often go to a pub or a bar not too far from where I was living in Florida at the time. It wasn't too far from where I was studying in university. And I would go and watch the games over there and treat myself to a pint or two of Guinness. Or else there'd be a huge television at one of the lounges at the university, and I'd go and watch it over there. It would be shown on NBC, one of the channels over there, or sometimes ESPN would show a few games, and that would be pretty much it. So another issue that I have is that we were moving around a lot during the early part of my childhood, and we settled down in Kent, but we never actually lived in London. And that's another reason why I could never really get behind any particular club team, because my local team, Dartford, isn't really a part of the Football League. They play in another division, which is considered non-league. And I never really had an opportunity to go and watch them play. And I was never fortunate enough to have the opportunity either to visit... to visit Highbury back then, or even the Emirates Stadium now. And that's going to be a big regret of mine, because I remember watching a documentary on Highbury. It was on the BBC's architecture program, Dream Spaces, where we got to know about the famous marble halls, the construction of the place, and the pristine turf, the ice baths, and several other parts of Highbury, and to hear about them knocking it down, I'm sure it would have it would have been like a dagger through the hearts of you, Jez, Darren, and everyone else. Because granted, the pitch wasn't really big enough, but we were winning trophies. We were playing a good brand of football, and when we were playing some of our early Champions League games at Wembley, we just couldn't hack it then. So we decided to move back to Highbury, and things worked out a lot better. And of course, it was in our last season at Highbury that we reached the Champions League final, let's not forget. So moving to Ashburton Grove, things just never really materialized again. But coming back to what I was saying, I never had the opportunity to visit Highbury. And of course, if and when I am to come back to the UK, the best I can do is go to see a game at the Emirates. And a lot of people, including Mr. Collins, make it very clear that the atmosphere over there is not really the best. Some of the fans can get exceptionally rowdy, for want of a better word. I had to say full marks to Kenny Ken for taking the opportunity to go over there whenever there is always a home game. He always hops on the tube and gets down at Highbury Islington and then walks all the way to the stadium. But for people like me who lived outside London, we never got the chance to go. And we'd always go to London on a Saturday. We'd take the National Rail train from Dartford, get down at Charing Cross, and just walk about the city, and then take the tube to wherever we wanted to go, whether it would be South Kensington for the museums, or even West Kensington to a place called the Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan, where my mum would occasionally had some stints as South Indian music and vocal teacher. There would also be a lot of performances held over there where we would have meals being served during the intermission. But when it came to actually watching a football game, and also bear in mind that during the mid 80s and I want to say early 90s as well, hooliganism was still a problem. In 1989, we also had the Hillsborough disaster. So I don't remember too much of that, but I remember the nature of the tragedy and how, and the huge pool of grief and sadness that echoed everywhere. And I look at that and I tell myself, in as much as I may regret not being able to go to a football game in the first division, I'm so glad that I never got to experience that level of crowd trouble, because I mean that is something really close to your heart as well, and I'm really sorry for mentioning that, I must say. But you sometimes, you when you think of things like that, you sort of count your blessings, and that's another reason why, when it comes to sharing a panel with people like yourself, people like Jez, people like Kenny, people like Darren, and others. I know in my heart that I have a lot to learn from people like yourselves, because you've lived through it, you've been to games, and of course, Jez will remember times when tickets were exceptionally cheap, not like the daylight robbery scams that we have today. So there's so much that I have to really glean and learn, and in as much as I regret not having those experiences, I make it a point to defer to what you all have to say. And it's just a shame that a large number of fans these days are unwilling to, unwilling to regard all of that, because you all have bigger stories to tell than me. And as you can see, my story is really only a non-entity compared to yours. So the fact that you called me here today to talk about this, it really does mean a great deal, and I'm glad I could share something with you, and I only hope that I've added value to your time today.
Certainly have, mate. And it's interesting listening to you talking about your life and how you moved around from this country to that country, and how difficult it was to keep up to date with football in England, because I remember when I did this with Ozzy Gunner, he had similar, not the same, because he wasn't moving around from country to country to country, but it was difficult. The reason it was difficult for him was the time difference.
Yes.
And I wanted to ram that fact home, because at some point or other, he was getting a lot of grief from one particular individual about supporting Arsenal, and why wasn't he supporting the team in Sydney, and and he, not just this one particular individual, but there was some question marks about, what right does he have to talk about Arsenal? He's Australian. What does he know about football? And, I'm hoping now that, we got this fella in England as an Aussie managing their Premier League football team, and he seems to be doing quite a good job for them. Let's be honest. And no matter how much it hurts, that it might help. But I was interested to hear about Dartford as well, because I know it quite well. And you were talking about the football team there, Dartford, and they played at a ground called Watling Street.
Right, yes.
And Maidstone played there for a while as well, because there were some issues with the ground in Maidstone and the council, and that's just another whole saga in itself. But I remember going there regularly to watch Maidstone playing when they were in the 4th division, and that would have been late 80s, early 90s, something like that. And that was quite exciting, and it was very interesting. It's a lot different from, first division football. But I'll take my hat off to you, Manny, for way you was able to keep your interest going, and you know, the steps you took to keep yourself up to date with what was going on, because it couldn't have been easy at all, not by any stretch of the imagination. So, you know, and that team that you were going on about, the team, the 1990-91 season team, was just, particularly the back five, it was absolutely immense. They were honestly, they're like, they conceded a ridiculously few amount of goals that season.
Yes.
And they only ever lost one game that season, and they were so close to being invincible. The only game they lost was away at Chelsea, 2-1. And that particular game, Tony Adams wasn't able to play in it because he was in prison for his drink driving offences. So it does make me wonder what would have happened if he'd been playing, because I'm pretty confident that they would have got something from that game and they would have gone invincible. But you know, that is what it is. But when you were like traveling around, because it sounds like you did move quite a lot, which must have been difficult in itself, not just for football, but you know, in terms of your education and like building relationships with other kids and stuff like that. I mean, how was it in terms of football? I mean, was you able to watch games with other people, or how did that work? I mean, like, for example, I know in America, I don't know whether it was the case then, but and certainly now, I know that there are lots of Arsenal supporters groups in different parts of the States. But were you able to hook up with other people and watch games, or was it just completely like impossible? Because I mean, I can imagine the TV coverage wasn't great, because live football was only on TV is a fairly new phenomenon when you like look back over the period of time. So I mean, even being an Arsenal fan in those countries, and how was it for you? Like, were you able to talk to other people, Arsenal fans, or was there other fans as well? There was a lot of banter with other fans. How did that work for you, Manny?
Yeah, one thing which I will say right now, Warren, is that when Dad made the decision to move the entire family to Saudi, that was an absolute kick in the teeth for me, because I finished my sixth form at my local school in Dartford, West Hill Junior School, and I had received an opportunity to continue my education at my local grammar school, which was Dartford Grammar. We had other grammar schools in Dartford. I think Wilmington was one, but Dartford Grammar was always one which I really dreamt of going to. And that was, of course, where Jagger and Richards had their education. And obviously they met there, and the rest is history. And I remember going for an open house to that school and really, feeling excited as to what could lay in store for me. I guess one of the issues that my dad felt he had with me was that I was I wouldn't say I had a learning disability, but I was possibly I had a mild case of ADHD or something like that at the time, and he didn't think I had the ability to concentrate on my lessons over there. But given how excited I was to join that school, potentially, I would have really taken to it like a duck to water. And the prospect of going through those years at that school, finishing my O levels and A levels or what have you, and then potentially moving on to university, whether in Kent or elsewhere, that was something which appealed to me. But obviously, when Dad had a chance to move to the Middle East, because the money he was receiving there was a lot better, he had to take the opportunity and move over there. And I guess I don't blame him, really, because there was a point in time where he was working at two different hospitals to earn enough cash to try and make ends meet. And I don't think I mentioned this. He at the time, he was working at Joyce Green Hospital, which, of course, had long since been relocated to Darrenth Park, away from Dartford. And he was also working at West Hill Hospital, which wasn't too far from the school where I went to. Although I was spending more years at York Road Junior School there. I mean, I was staying in one class for quite some time, but only had the chance to move to West Hill in my 5th year. But that's another story. But he was working two different hospitals at a time, and there was even a time when he would even be he'd even go all the way to places like Hastings and even Surrey to get some work over there. And every other weekend, we'd take the drive to on the M25 from Dartford all the way to Surrey to catch up with him and stay with him. And then on a Sunday evening or Monday early morning, we drive back to Dartford in time for us to go to school. So when he had the chance to move to the Middle East and earn some more money and not have this ridiculous lifestyle, he had to take it. And as much as it was a kick in the teeth for me, and I couldn't understand it at the time, growing up, I ended up realizing that was what he had to do. But when we touched down in the Middle East, in Saudi, there weren't too many British expats at the time. And I remember going to an American school, which was operating under the K9 system, now K12, of course. And they had opportunities to play football, or soccer, as they called it, outside the school after school hours. Of course, we had these clubs where we'd get to play football in the autumn and the winter months, and then baseball in the spring and summer. Mainly the spring, I would say, because summer obviously was a holiday. And it was there that I started to play in goal and develop myself as a goalkeeper. I remembered the skills that I'd learned from watching the likes of Seaman and Eric Torstvedt and other goalkeepers, Peter Schmeichel and company. And I fancied myself as being a keeper who had some decent reflexes, who could make some decent saves. I did concede more than a few, but, it's always a part of the learning curve. And I was pretty good back then. I enjoyed playing, and we had an AstroTurf ground, and it was lovely. As far as watching football is concerned, I never had the opportunity to watch too many games because I think I told you we didn't have satellite television back then. Ironically, we were able to watch a lot of the Barcelona Olympic games that were taking place that time. There was some coverage of that live or delayed or what have you, and I did enjoy watching some of that. But as far as football from Europe and the top leagues was concerned, we could only depend on these review shows and other football shows where we'd get coverage of the results. And I never really had a chance to talk about football too much with a few school children because that wasn't really too much of a craze over there. We didn't have too many English expats. There were a few, but very few and far between. And ironically, several of those few were responsible for organizing the club football games in which I played. And I really have nothing but fond memories of all of that. But because it was an American school, which is affiliated with all of that, we sort of were more into the American culture. And when it comes to Americans, for the most part, soccer isn't exactly their cup of tea, but attitudes have changed over the years. Then that was in a town called, that was actually in the town called Yanbu, which is on the west coast, not too far from the city of Jeddah. Mm-hmm. But then after 1 year, we moved to the capital city, Riyadh, and I went to a different school which I didn't really like at all because it was a system which I absolutely hated. And I didn't think many of the students were, at my level when it came to the way I spoke and and my thought process or what have you. And so even there as well, we never really had the opportunity to watch live club football. It was mainly international football during the summer on television with the Arabic commentary or what have you. And we did play football, but the football field over there did not have AstroTurf. It was basically a combination of dust and sand. And so if as a goalkeeper you would dive on that, be prepared to get your school uniform, completely dirty. And so you'd have a tough time, I tell you, when playtime would be over and you'd have to go and wipe everything off and clean everything. And it would be even worse if you tried to slide on those dust and those rocks, and you'd run the risk of tearing your trousers at the knee joint. I mean, that was something which I didn't really enjoy. And that was when I found out that as good as I was, there were other students who were a lot taller than me, and they obviously had more experience playing. And I never got selected to play for, the. I mean, we had house systems over there, just like the grammar schools do,
Yeah.
and even the younger schools back, the middle schools back in England. But even then, I never got selected to play for my house team or even the school team because I was considered to be, not too experienced, never really played enough, and I wasn't quite tall enough either. And that regrettably was when I started to, my growth started to stop a little bit. And I mean, I can't control my height. My parents aren't giants themselves. Dad's about 5'7". My mum, God rest her soul, was an even 5 foot. I'm about 5'8" or 5'9", which isn't exactly short, but I'm definitely not, as tall as Mr. Seaman. And 6'4" is supposed to be the minimum height, the best height for a goalkeeper. Emi Martinez is 6'5", and I consider him to be one of the best in the world. Ramsdale's 6'2", and the reason why I don't rate him is because he has poor positioning and flaps horribly on crosses half the time. But so when it came to school, it was mainly, playing. And we didn't have those football boots at the time because it wasn't really so serious per se. As long as you had a decent pair of, trainers which wouldn't wear and tear very easily, that served the purpose. But when it came to university, for which I came down here, we had
where? Sorry, Mani?
Over here in India. And that was another thing which I hated because I would have preferred to go back to England if I could, to at least give myself a chance there. But, in his infinite wisdom, Dad thought it would be a nice idea to come down here instead, where family comforts would help. Fat lot of good that did. And even here as well, in the late 90s, if you wanted to play seriously for the university team or at any level, you had to have the football boots with the cleats, as they say, with the studs, and also the shin pads. I do remember buying a pair of shin pads when I was much younger back in England, but I think I outgrew them. And I also knew that it was going to be a little bit more of a dangerous game, a little bit more violent, and it was going to be a bit of a step up for me. And especially given that I never got to play too much at school, I didn't know if I would be ready to do that. So I sort of weaned myself away from playing football. And that was effectively when my football career, if you can call it a career, sort of ended. I would still play occasionally on smaller grounds, more just kickabouts, as it were, with a few friends of mine. But that was really just about it. And so when it came to watching football, in the Middle East, it was, as I said, non-existent. And talking about football with friends was also even less existent than that. And even here in India, not too many people, not too many of my friends were into football that much. It was cricket which really dominated a lot of their discussions. It was probably when I went to the US to study for my master's degrees. I have an MBA degree and also a Master's of Science in Finance. I was living in the Gulf Coast in Tampa. Shout out to the Gulf Coast Gooners, one of several supporters groups in Florida. And the Gulf Coast Gooners will always be my favorite. They're also on Instagram, if you can give them a follow. Shout out to Tom Sabol and his band of merry men and women. And at least in the US, I knew that in as much as soccer might not have been very popular there, it did have a bit of a following. And of course, my university had a soccer team there, and I would watch that team quite often. And we had some, expat students from some Latin countries, but also from England coming to play. And I obviously got quite close with a lot of the English guys, and I got to know a lot more of the other guys, even the American guys who would play on the team. I got to know several of the coaches. I even had the pleasure, I kid you not, of getting to know Ryan Thompson, former Jamaican international goalkeeper, runner up with his nation in the Copa America. I believe it was in the mid 2010s. I don't quite remember the year. I can just look that up briefly. But he was an alumnus of the University of Tampa, and he played there for 4 years as the starting goalkeeper in that team, and they reached the national semi-finals in his freshman year, in his first year at university. And afterwards, he went to Europe for trials. He played famously for Shamrock Rovers and was a part of the Shamrock Rovers team, which qualified for European competition. I believe they were in the what is now the Europa League. So I know I'm dropping his name, but it was wonderful to get to know him. I still consider him a friend, although he's now busy with his own goalkeeping academy. But I mean, that was another thing which also really it sort of helped a great deal. And when I found out about the Gulf Coast Gooners, and when I found out that they were organizing these watch-alongs at a pub not too far from where I was living at the time, I'd go there on several occasions to watch Arsenal play. No real big memories as such, because often whenever I'd go, the team wouldn't do too well. And another really good memory of mine, though, was when I was taking summer classes. I remember watching the 2014 FA Cup final when we played against Hull City. We went down 2-0, but Santi Cazorla got us back in with a delightful free kick. And then, there's only one Aaron Ramsey. He popped up. So at least over there in the US, I knew I had a group of friends with whom I could speak about the game quite a bit. And obviously getting to watch the games whenever I could was another big bonus, because, to English guys like me, for the most part, we enjoy watching football. It's our national game. I do enjoy cricket as well. I remember watching several days of cricket back in England. And, obviously cricket on the BBC was really the thing at the time. When it moved to Channel 4, I don't think it was quite the same. And then obviously Sky came in, the rest. And in America, I think it might not have been necessarily as really good, as really, intense as it would be back in England. But the people I would meet at a lot of these screenings of games, and also whenever they'd come to watch our university play, they'd be pretty knowledgeable about the game. They'd surprise you with their own perspectives and their own ideologies and so forth. And it was a nice sort of atmosphere. And not too long before I left, I had the pleasure of getting in touch with a certain Gary Walker, whose son Callan was also on the local team. And this gentleman, Mr. Walker, happens to be a close friend of the greatest captain in our club's history. He's also mentioned in Mr. Adams's first autobiography. So he now lives, of course, all the way in Palm Beach in Florida, where he runs his own academy and also another business there. And he had nothing but the greatest stories to tell about his time growing up in England, being closely associated with the club, being mates with Tony, and obviously Tony getting to see his family extended, of course. And I remember also during one Thanksgiving weekend going to his house and taking a look at his all his memorabilia. The guest room at his house is called the Tony Adams Suite for a pretty good reason. And yeah, so it's amazing how sometimes, not just through English expats, but also through locals who are more engrossed in the game, you have more of a platform where you can talk a lot more about the game and really indulge your passion and your interest or what have you. And you don't feel as though you're isolated. And that was one of the things which sort of was reflective of the fact that many people from the UK took the journey across the Atlantic Ocean to work/settle in the US. And so obviously the more people who came, the more it was necessary that that service would be provided for them. And, it's to the benefit of many people like myself. And I'm just glad to have had that experience. But not a day goes by when I don't look back on my youth in England and how things would potentially have been. I think Dad often jokes that if I had stayed in England and gone to the local grammar school, I eventually would have become something like more of a hooligan as a way. Not in that sense of the word, but more focused on playing football and watching football to the detriment of my academics. He knows that that's not really true. I mean, that's just a part of me, and it's just, if anything, he played football in medical school. So I always say that I got my love for sports from him. I also got his thick, chunky footballer legs from him, and they were quite strong back then. They could kick quite well. The upper body wasn't as strong then, but I've been working to rectify that, of course, recently. But it was through Dad, really, that I got my love for sports, and he never really seemed to want to recognize that as much. But I can't blame him necessarily for having that sort of perspective, because, when he's focusing on earning money to feed his wife and 3 children, indulging in sporting passions wouldn't really be the foremost thing on his mind. I do remember Mum actually taking me to see the tennis at Wimbledon. It was the semi-final in 1984, John McEnroe against Pat Cash. And she tells me about how I would be sitting on her lap eating from a bag of peanuts, and a lot of people sitting next to my mum just wondering how a small guy like myself could eat that much. And they were saying this boy could grow up to be a rugby player one day.
Quite.
Little did they know. And obviously, I look at my departure from England as probably the beginning of the end of any dreams I had of having a sporting career, because it was very difficult at the time, Warren, to really get too engrossed in the game. I remember my first year in Saudi, I told you about the club football that I enjoyed playing, and that was brilliant. But opportunities to really play seriously were few and far between afterwards, and I was never truly able to take it quite seriously, and that's another regret that I have. But I guess one thing which people can take from my life is that, yes, there can be disappointments and there are going to be a few regrets, but sometimes you also have to count a few blessings and try and make the most of whatever opportunity you can get. Obviously, there's no chance of playing seriously, but I still wouldn't mind having a kickabout every now and then. I'm still able to stop a ball well and pass it back. I have a decent right-footed kick. I'm left-handed, but I kick with my right foot. And as long as you still have some skills and have an opportunity to use them, you're not really going to lose them. And as long as you still have a love for the game, you still are passionate about watching and playing and also really being a student of the game, you're never going to lose that. And I consider myself to be a student of the game. I still have to learn from a lot of people with their different perspectives on the game. And I consider people like yourself and Kenny and even especially Dell and Kyle and Jez and Warren as people who know a great deal about the game. And I have to sort of learn from them, as I said. And that's that's why I try to be a bit respectful towards everyone. And even if a person were to come on a stream and, utter such waffle, I wouldn't talk down to them per se, but I just calmly say, why that opinion is a bit misguided. And even people like yourself and Jez have also taken the time to do that. And I know that sometimes people may criticize both of you for being a little bit, sometimes a little bit harsh in your criticism sometimes, but that's because you've seen everything. And people need to understand that when when people get to the age that you and Jez and Darren are, you've seen a lot of things. You have your own ideas entrenched in your mind, but you've seen it all, and your ideas have a good grounding. And so, people need to learn from you. People can learn from me. I can learn from several people. I could also learn from people who were younger than me in a way if I'm proved wrong. But all I can say right now, but all I can say right now is, in as much as I could have done a bit more in terms of being able to play football, in as much as I feel a little bit hurt at missing out on watching much football during my middle school years away from England, I've never really lost my love for the game. And now that I'm able to watch it a lot more frequently, I still am happy to continue indulging that passion and interest. And hopefully long may it continue. Maybe on my bucket list, when I come back to the UK, I'll catch a game either at the Emirates or Wembley. Emirates might not really be worth the while, but Wembley, I cannot miss that, because I consider myself, Warren, to be more of an England fan than an Arsenal fan per se, but Arsenal is still very much a part of me.
Well, because the thing is, you can be both. It's not a problem. You can have your international team, you can have your club side. The two aren't mutually exclusive. But what I wanted to ask you about very briefly, Mani, is about where you're currently living in India, right? Is there much appetite for local football, like in the Indian League? I don't really know anything about Indian football at all. And it always surprised me growing up, and still does, I guess, to a degree, about why it is that India has such a good cricket team, because they are, in my opinion, the Indian cricket team in the past and still is one of the best cricket sides in the world, right?
Yes.
And that they're so good at hockey, or they always were. I remember watching them in the Olympics, and they're always in, the frame for gold medals, silver medals, stuff like that. Yet I don't get much exposure to football from India. I don't know whether it's because there's no interest in it or what it is, but is there, why it is we don't get more Indian players playing in Europe? Because I remember there was a guy years and years ago. He was a striker, I think. He played for Norwich City, and I'm pretty sure he was Indian. But you could count the number of Indian players in the First Division Premier League on the fingers of one hand. And I don't understand. I just don't. Is it something that's not particularly? Is it just not popular, or what is there a league there now? Honestly, Manny, I have got no idea whatsoever. You might as well ask me if there's about football on Mars, because I just haven't got a clue.
That's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine. And one thing I can tell you is that player in question is a guy named. I don't know if he played for Norwich City, but I do remember him being selected to play for Bury. And he did, in fact, play 37 games for Bury over 3 seasons, scoring 8 goals. Obviously, given that he was from the north of the country, where it's a bit colder, that's where football seems to be really a lot more popular. Football in India is sort of a legacy in some ways of the Brits who obviously brought the game to India, and India does have a history of football. Believe it or not, in 1950, the team were able to qualify for the World Cup, but because they weren't allowed to play barefoot, they decided that they weren't going to go to Brazil and play. And I tell you what, that was a missed opportunity. Even if the local food might not have been the best, as England's boys found out, it's still an experience to go over there and play, one of the spiritual homes of the game, as it were. And there have been several club teams over the years that have had a sort of a rivalry, but because I think it was in the 50s and the 60s when, that was really at its at some sort of a peak when the national team was competing and the other league teams were also doing quite well, but it never really got the exposure that it deserved. And one of the reasons why cricket became a lot more popular is because, like football in some ways, it was also a reasonably inexpensive game to play. But when England won the World Cup in 1983, that really kick-started a huge wave of popularity. Now, you mentioned Indian hockey. Obviously, they were winning several gold medals back in the day. But a large chunk of those teams were comprised of Anglo-Indian players, basically players of mixed race. They'd be half Indian and half British, as it were. That's why several of those players had very, very English-sounding names. You hear the names of Allen and Hammond, you'd instantly think of the English cricketers, but any Indian sports fan will tell you that those were the names of Richard Allen and Leslie Hammond, two of India's greatest Olympians. But again, because that was so back in the day, there wasn't really too much in terms of television exposure, not too much in terms of government support and revenue. So many players, as such, would have fine collections of medals, but not really that much in terms of remuneration from the government. Everything changed when India won the World Cup in '83. That was when people really took notice that this team could compete at the highest level. And then, of course, I think it was in the '80s that that the Indian cricket team started to become very, very, very competitive indeed. But back to Indian football, they lacked a lot in terms of international exposure at the time, and consequently, there was no real interest. But now, of course, some things have changed, and I can tell you about the Indian Super League in a minute. But over the years, with the advent of satellite television, a lot more games started to be showed, a lot more international games featuring the Indian team were broadcast, and that's how people got to know Baichung Bhutia. So no, he didn't play for Norwich City, but he did play in the English League before moving back to Asia to play. And of course, he was back at one of the biggest clubs back in Calcutta at the time. But then he also moved to play in Malaysia. And yes.
I was going to say, because I remember this fella, he may not even be registered as being Indian, but I'm pretty sure this guy played for Norwich. He was quite tall, this fella, as well. I remember seeing him play at Highbury in a game. Then Norwich incidentally won that game 2-1. It was near the end of the season. But anyway, sorry, Manny, to interrupt you.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I mean, I'm actually at my computer, so I can look up that player in question. But back to what you were talking about. Obviously, there was more broadcast of the games of the national team, and more players started to get a bit of exposure, and people started to focus a little bit more attention on the old Indian League, and it was some time in the middle part of the 2010s that the Indian Super League, as it is known now, came into prominence, and that was probably the first season. Of course, saw several players who obviously were at the end of their careers. International legends like Alex Del Piero, Roberto Carlos. They came in the first season to sort of help promote the league with the different expansion teams, and that sort of was how it took off. And again, with more money from satellite television, those games are now getting exposure. And also the best part about that is that a lot more exposure is now being given to a lot more of the teams in the I League, which is a little bit lower than the Indian Super League. But also people are taking a lot more notice of that, and a lot more overseas players and managers are coming over here to manage. And where I live, it's in Chennai, or Madras as I still call it. home of the famous Madras curry powder and the first British settlement in India. So you can walk around anywhere, and several people will speak more than decent English. But so there are some instances where, if you know the local language, it's desirable and in some cases essential. But here in Madras, there is a good football culture. The stadium where Chennai and FC, the local team, play, is not too far from the main railway station, from where all the trains go from Madras to different places across the country. And that is, of course, where a lot of international matches have been held. But it's, of course, where the Chennai and FC team play, and they have won the league twice, most notably under the former Aston Villa and Derby County manager John Gregory, and another British manager who's managed the club here is Owen Coyle, who has, of course, now come back for a second stint. You might remember him as the former manager of Bolton Wanderers and Burnley, and several. Yeah, and several English players and managers and other professionals from overseas come over here to play in the Super League to try and test their skills against the best Indian talent here. The league was basically set up, Warren, to try and entice a lot more people to watch the game, and also to provide an initiative for several talented Indian players to showcase their skills alongside some decent foreign players. So it's growing now in a way. It's not quite going to reach the same level as cricket. And what's really damning in a way is that given that India hasn't won an Olympic medal for quite some time, I think it was in 1980 or so that they won their last gold medal. Since then, I believe the UK won in 88, if memory serves me right. And India have been very competitive. They just haven't been able to quite get their act together when it comes to Olympic coverage, so to Olympic success, or even world success. So when it comes to that, I think other sports in this country are always going to suffer in comparison to cricket, because the cricket team is always going to be so competitive and play really well and be in contention to win all the big prizes. It benefits a great deal more from the exposure, from the TV revenue. I just think it's fair to say that hockey and football suffer in a way from having their success at the wrong time. But I'd like to think, especially with this boy Neeraj Chopra, who is, of course, the Olympic javelin champion, and also very recently won the world championship, something which our very own Steve Backley couldn't quite do. Gutted for him, but Jan Zalesny was just too strong for him at that time. Obviously, with more success and a lot more sports, you'd like to think in theory that those will get a little bit more exposure, but football still has to take a little bit more root and try and qualify for if the Indian team qualifies for a few more international tournaments, that would be good. I believe in 2011 they qualified for the Asian Cup and had a good crack. Didn't quite work out, but they do have the potential to be a little bit more competitive, and they are playing a lot more games against some rather strong opposition, including from Middle Eastern teams, which are normally pretty good. But I think there has to be a little bit more in terms of, development of the game, but it's just a reminder that nothing succeeds like success. And just as Arsenal's lack of success can sometimes, discourage a lot of fans at times, it's the relative lack of success of the football teams that, can sometimes, I wouldn't say turn off fans, but also not really enamor them much to the game. But I think the more football is played, the more success is earned, the more exposure there is. You can see a lot of that starting to change, and maybe you'll see a much bigger following. But since coming back here from the US, I have been to see Chennai and FC play twice, and it has been quite decent. The standard would be akin to, I want to say something like League One or League Two football, maybe slightly a level lower, or definitely an equivalent to League Two. But it's certainly not bad by any means. And you would think that. I mean, it's a little bit like how the Saudi Pro League is able to entice several great players to come and play for them, but most of those players are also near the end of their careers anyway. I would like to think that if India was willing to shell out a little bit more money to get more players to come, it would be good. And bear in mind, in the first season when we had all these legends coming over here to play, and not doing too bad a job. Even David James was playing and managing one of the teams which reached the final. That was the Kerala Blasters. Um, you'd think it would have enticed a lot more in terms of foreigners to play, but they also wanted to focus a lot more on the local Indian talent and try and keep the number of foreigners playing in the team at a time down to, I wouldn't say a minimum, but just one less. But once they get the balance right, once they're able to, do whatever they can to improve the quality of their play and also see more and more talent coming through and get that exposure, I think we're going to see a lot more in terms of, awareness of the league from overseas, and maybe more and more people can come over here to India and play quite a bit. So there is some hope, I would say. It's certainly not going to compare to being able to watch football back in England, but bear in mind that because I didn't live in London, I couldn't get to see Arsenal play. At least over here, whenever they can play, if I can get myself a ticket, all I have to do is just hop on the train and I'm there in about maybe half an hour, just a 5-minute walk to the stadium, and Bob's your uncle. So if more and more people take the time to go all the way to the stadium and watch more games, because I can tell you that at certain times the stadium would be empty in very large parts, but there would be some very loud pockets of fans cheering for the team. But it wouldn't compare to a cricket match, which would be packed to the rafters. And the cricket stadium over here, the Chidambaram, which is also in the center, the north center of the city, that gets packed for limited overs games. But you can definitely get a ticket to watch the test matches. But again, in a nutshell, Indian football just needs to have a little bit more in terms of exposure and more interest being generated. And if they can also improve the standard of the play slowly but surely, more and more people are going to be interested in that, which can only be a good thing.
No, exactly, 100%, mate. Now, before we go on, I just want to bring everyone's attention to this slide I've got on the screen at the moment. This is all about Mani, and I want you to go and check out his Instagram site, and also make sure you follow him on Threads and also on Twitter as well. And make sure you go and visit him when he's doing his stuff on the various other YouTube channels that he gets involved with. So very quickly, Manny, can you just give us a brief rundown of the other YouTube channels that you're involved with?
Yeah, well, obviously, I've appeared with you, Warren, on a stream of yours, and I'd love to come back again if the opportunity presents itself. But mainly through Del Boy Gunner TV, that was how I got to know Warren and Jez and several others. You can also catch me on Oris Talks Football. It's another channel run by a guy named Orist, and I'm one of the co-hosts over there. Coach's Corner, where we do watch-alongs for football and cricket. We have a cricket show called Off to the Boundary, where Kenny Ken has appeared and talked with us. He enjoys his cricket every bit as much as I do, maybe even more. And there are several other channels where I don't play that much of a big role, but I do come and speak, occasionally whenever I can. But these are the main three channels where you can find me. I'm also trying my best to, reignite, as it were, the S. Featley TV channel. But there have been some, it's just things have not really been able to, get quite off the ground yet. But I am trying my best for that. And being on YouTube always gives me a great deal of happiness, and I don't really want to see it become something that would, lead to a lot of animosity or anything of that sort. So I try to keep it respectful. But if people do end up disrespecting me, I bring them down to Chinatown, as Robert De Niro would say. So, yeah.
So you should.
And I applaud people like Warren for taking the time to make streams like this and create content like this, because it's an investment in time, and it's something that you really have to put your heart into. And many of the streams that he's done, be it football related or otherwise, have been quite outstanding. And I've learned a great deal from just listening to him talk and being in the chat for several of his streams. And one of my personal favorites would be the stream you did, Warren, between sort of comparing Arteta and Carlo Ancelotti. I tell you what, if any Arteta fan were to watch that stream, they would literally be walking away completely dazed.
No, but it's just crazy. But I don't really want to focus on him at the minute. I want to focus on you. And
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a series of questions now. So just
Yes.
very briefly, who growing up when you've been throughout your years of watching Arsenal, who would you say was your favourite player?
David Seaman. I fancied myself as a goalkeeper, and I remember watching Peter Shilton in Italian 90, but he was sort of coming to the end of his career. But Seaman was always the goalkeeper I really enjoyed. And one of the things which I loved about him was how he kept things simple. He didn't sweat the small things. He took pride in his positioning and only really made camera saves when it was necessary. And he got even better as he went on. So he'd be my favorite, but I do have a lot of players I really liked, but he'd be my favorite.
Okay,
No question
fine.
about it.
And so you've just told us about your favourite player, but who do you think Arsenal's greatest ever player was?
Wow, that is
a
tough
or
question.
is it different for you? Because some people, their favourite player, they also think is the club's greatest ever player. It might be that you think Seaman was our greatest ever player, but I'm going to ask you the question anyway.
No, I wouldn't call him our greatest, because there were players who came before him and who were, probably epitomized the club a great deal more than him, I would say, because he wasn't around in 87 and 89 when the club won the League Cup and the First Division title. That was John Lukic back in the day. But Adams was very much a part of that. And the reason why I consider Adams to be the greatest player, marginally over Thierry Henry, is because in terms of success, he's probably the only player to win league titles in 3 different decades, if memory serves me right. I believe 89, 91, 98, and 2002. He obviously grew up with the club, and I was able to watch him during his youth and also his some of his middle and mainly a lot of his final years. And you could cut that gentleman open and you see Arsenal through that. And he began his career at the club, ended his career at the club. It was he was literally the epitome of what it meant to be an Arsenal player. It could potentially have been David O'Leary, but he was phased out and then moved to Leeds United and played for a season. He's still definitely up there as one of our greatest, but in at least in terms of longevity and commitment. But sadly, he was in an era where success was hard to come by. And as for Thierry Henry, he was also quite outstanding in the way he played, and he has 2 league titles to his name, including League and Cup double in 2002. But I think I lost a bit of respect for him when, in qualifying for the 2010 World Cup, he committed that handball for France against Ireland and never owned up to his mistake or admitted his wrongdoing. And I do not have any respect for people who indulge in that sort of stuff. And I lost a bit of respect for him that day. Yeah. And when I think of Tony Adams, I think of some of the greatest successes I'd seen Arsenal experience, including the European Cup Winners' Cup success, mainly, of course, under George Graham. And I think that was one of the best times to watch Arsenal, because granted, under Arsene Wenger, we started playing some very attractive football, but back in those days, we kept it simple. We turned on the style when it mattered, and we knew how to win. And it was really good fun watching that team. And ironically, the Tottenham team of those years, which was managed by the likes of David Pleat and Terry Venables, among others, they knew how to play a lot of silky football, and they had the likes of Gascoigne and Chris Waddle at the time, but they wouldn't win very much, you see. In fact, they hardly won anything.
No, well, see, the thing is as well, George was very tactically astute, whereas, Wenger, I don't think the players he had at his disposal should have achieved much more. They should have won the European Cup, and they didn't. And I think that was a lot of that was to do with the fact that when we went into Europe, we were playing against teams who were used to playing that style of football that Wenger was getting the club to play. Whereas here in England, it was quite radical, so teams weren't used to it. So yeah, but moving on anyway. Some people would say this is quite a negative question, and I'm it might seem that I'm trying to open you up and try and get you to speak negatively, but it honestly isn't that. I want you to tell me, right? You say to me you don't want to answer the question, that's fine. Who do you think was Arsenal's worst ever player?
Oh boy, that is a tough one, Warren.
Darren had something with this one as well.
No, because the reason why he would have trouble, mind you, is because he will remember watching the likes of Gus Caesar back in the day. Thankfully, I didn't see him. I do remember seeing the likes of
let me tell you, but go on, sorry.
I do remember the likes of Igor Stepanovs and Pascal Segon, who were absolutely awful. I did not like William Gallas, and I think so if I had to pick from those three players who, obviously now a certain number 29 is right up there, could very well be one of the worst. And let's not forget a certain other Chelsea cast-off who came and was only here for one season before moving back to Brazil and now coming back with Fulham. The reason why I give Igor Stepanov some slack is because he didn't cover himself with glory in 2000, 2001. But in 2002, when we had a bit of a crisis at left back, I believe, we had said goodbye since then to Nigel Winterburn, and Silvino wasn't with us. So Ashley Cole got injured, but Stepanovs filled in at left back, including in that game at St. James's Park when Dennis Bergkamp scored that wonder goal. And he actually played a bit of a key role there in helping us out. It was just unfortunate that he wasn't able to win a medal because he only made, I think, 3 appearances that time. But Segon was also horrible in many ways because he kept making mistake after mistake after mistake.
I just think he was really unlucky.
Yeah.
He's the unluckiest player I think I've ever seen in my life. But go on, sorry.
Yeah, but I call him the Frank Leboeuf doppelganger because he obviously looks like the ex-French international who played for Chelsea.
If you had a player who epitomizes a comedy actor, it would be him. And I would have fucking Frank Spencer playing him. he reminds me of Frank Spencer.
Oh my goodness.
Doesn't matter what he did. It would always end up going wrong.
I'll tell you what. I do remember watching Some Mothers Do Have 'Em, that show in particular. And my dad will always joke that I remind them of him in a way. And I do actually... I should mention this. One of my biggest party tricks is being able to impersonate Michael Crawford, but I'll probably do that when we're off.
Yes, please.
When we're off, so you can hear that. I'm not going to do that right now when we're live. I'm not going to take the Mickey out of myself. But yeah, you might have to shave Michael Crawford's head. But I didn't like Frank Leboeuf as a defender, and I certainly didn't like Pascal Segon. And how that fellow got to play so many games will always be a mystery to me. I think obviously as a Frenchman, Wenger had a bit of an affinity towards him, but he cost us several games in 2003. It was absolutely horrible. And in 2004, he never should have gotten a winner's medal as part of the Invincible squad, but he did. And he ended up playing more games while the likes of Ray Parlour and Martin Keown were limited to very short substitute appearances, which was scandalous in a way. But what can you do? Gallus, I never liked him because of his Chelsea connections, and he never should have been given the captaincy, and that sulk against Birmingham City will always be fresh in my mind. He was a decent defender, don't get me wrong. I just didn't like his attitude. But if you want me to rate the worst player in terms of ability, someone who simply didn't deserve to be in the team no matter what, and someone who I saw continually, just prove that, it would have to be Pascal Segon. The jury's still out on Kai Havertz, mind you. He's only played a few games. Willian didn't offer very much, but Segon was just horrible. And for a club,
certain Swiss doesn't feature on that list, do they?
You mean Mr. Sand? You mean, are you talking about Sandros or Xhaka?
Xhaka.
Yeah, look, he was bad, but not too bad. And he also had his moments. He could score some goals. He did win a few FA Cups with us. He could bring out a few good games, but with Segon, I could never recall a good game from him.
No,
horrible.
You're absolutely spot on there, mate. Okay, so what do you think was Arsenal's greatest ever achievement?
Oh boy. Well, I'm not going to say the 2004 Invincibles season because we drew a lot of games there. And that was the season when, if anything, we should have tried seriously to aim for the treble. I think losing in the semi-finals of the FA Cup and the quarterfinals of the Champions League were absolute sickeners. But hey, at least we had the prize of going unbeaten and the Gold Premiership trophy. No team, not even Manchester City or Liverpool, have been able to accomplish that. But the minute they do, we can say goodbye to that unique honor. I would say probably that in my lifetime as an Arsenal fan, whenever you win a European trophy, it's something wonderful. And the 94 European Cup Winners' Cup was probably our best achievement, which I saw. And what was heartbreaking about 95 was that we could have made history by being the first team to defend that trophy, only for the Spurs reject Naeem to break our hearts. Yeah. And since then, of course, the Cup Winners' Cup was disbanded. I could never understand why. And when you take a look at how our European history is quite pitiful compared to other teams, the only other European trophy we won, mind you, was the Fairs Cup, which could probably be the equivalent of the Intertoto Cup. That also got disbanded.
It was a forerunner to the UEFA Cup, but yeah, go on. Sorry, Manny.
Oh, yeah. No. You're right. I'm glad you set me straight there. But the Fairs Cup obviously was something that was quite good in a way. But then, we just weren't able to get our acts together. I think we've reached the European Cup final twice. Of course, in 2006, that was absolutely heartbreaking. We reached the final of the UEFA Cup twice, but we never really won it. And when you take a look at the fact that Nottingham Forest have won the European Cup twice, Manchester United have won it 3 times, Chelsea have won it, I believe, twice. Liverpool, of course, 6 times. We just have a poor European history, and so any European trophy is always going to be something that will be remembered more than our FA Cup and League doubles, more than the Invincible season. When you're able to mix it with the continental best, that is really when you can say you are one of the elite.
Yeah, because our record in Europe is appalling.
Yes.
For a club of our size, we should have done way better. We should have at least 1, if not 2, Champions League / European Cups on the mantelpiece. We should. And the fact we haven't, it's unbelievable, really. But, so how far up that list would you place Anfield 89? Given the fact that at the time, that team that we beat at Liverpool on their own turf, they hadn't been beaten for something like 3 years or something at home, by 2 goals or more. They were consistently winning European Cups. That I would argue quite strongly that they were better than the Man City team at the moment, right? So how high up that list, Manny, would you say that that was. I mean, do you remember it?
No, I don't, because I think I told you that I only really started watching football in 1990, and by that time,
Right.
1989
No,
had been
fair
done
enough.
and dusted. So I don't have too many big memories of that, to be honest.
Right.
If
No,
I
that's
were
fair
to,
enough.
if I,
That's fair enough.
but
Yeah.
I'll
I
answer your
fully agree.
question now best I can. If I can rate some of our best achievements, obviously the Cup Winners' Cup win would be right up there. I
Mm.
would put the 91 league success in second place as far as when I'm talking about my experiences. But I would say that 1989 would be a very close third, not too far
Mm.
behind 91, because I never got to see 1989. And obviously, I think if memory serves me right, that was a season where we had some troubles. We, if memory serves me right, I think it was you or Jez who said that we lost at home to Wimbledon in the penultimate game, which meant that the trip
We lost at
to
home. What it panned out was we lost at home to Derby,
yes, Derby.
and then in the following week, the following Wednesday, we drew at home to Wimbledon.
Ah, yes, drew at home to Wimbledon.
Yeah. And at that point, I thought it had gone because we built up quite a big lead over them as well throughout the
Yeah.
course of the season. And this, of course, was the season where Hillsborough happened, and we were
Yes.
supposed to play them. Not would have it was scheduled for not long after the game where Hillsborough happened. So they got a lot of their games got postponed as a consequence of what happened at Hillsborough, and then they had to catch up, and they started reeling us in, and they were just relentless. I remember thinking coming out after watching that game against Wimbledon, I thought the title had gone. I really did. I thought that's it. We've blown it. We're not. We're not going to do it because we had to go there and we had to win. It was well, I didn't know then how much what the margin was going to be, but it looked like we would have to go there and win to win it. And they
Yeah.
were just relentless. And then when they smacked West Ham 5-0 or 5-1 at home, that was it. It was like we needed to go there and win by 2, and I just thought it's not going to happen, but it did. So anyway, sorry, Manny.
Yeah, I can understand how you feel that way because obviously it was a titanic struggle. We were leading for a long period of time, and then they caught up. And I think it would be fair to say, Warren, that if I did get the chance to watch that '89 season and really understood, football then, I really would place that quite high.
Mm.
But I think also it would have been heartbreaking as well, given that Liverpool had been through the Hillsborough disaster. I think they were everyone's sentimental favourites to win the title.
We
So
had
you
the
can
whole
understand.
country was against us
Yeah.
because of that.
So
The whole country wanted them to win. That was the other thing.
yeah.
So it was how George managed to pull that off. I think it was his crowning achievement as manager of Arsenal. I really do. Never mind
I
in
get
the
that.
one season, but that going there with the whole country against us, the media, all the except for the United fans, they all wanted us to lose because of what had happened at Hillsborough. We were on a hiding to nothing,
Yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah,
sorry, mate.
but no, it's all right, and I do understand where you're coming from, and and as I said, if I had seen that season, if I'd watched that as a youngster, I'd probably say that would be a great accomplishment. But I just think that when it came to the '91 season, Liverpool, of course, were the defending league champions, having recovered from that heartbreak to win in 1990, and they also were fancying themselves to go on and defend that title, but then we proved to be too strong for them, and we had, I think, one of our best ever league seasons, marginally better than the 2002 season, and obviously in '98, when you consider how far behind we were at one stage, to claw our way back and win it was also something magnificent. But I just think that in terms of consistent quality and how we were able to, you know, dominate an entire season, 1991 is my best memory. But I would put 1989 just behind 1991 as the third best, if that answers your question.
No,
And I'm cheating. I'm cheating a bit because I didn't see that, mind you. But
no,
hopefully that answers your question on how
no,
much.
because
Uh,
I
yeah,
didn't see anything during the 30s, but I would have that period would be on my list.
I
Um,
can get that completely.
yeah. Um, so since you have been watching football, Manny,
Yes.
what what was your favourite memory of watching Arsenal? Been what has been your favourite memory of watching Arsenal since you started watching the club?
I think I'd probably have to sort of break that down into different stages because there was a point when I was watching, when I wasn't watching Arsenal, and then started watching them again. I think 1991 would be, perhaps my first favorite because that was, of course, when everything began. 2002 would definitely be my second favorite because I was watching obviously a lot of the games back then. The coverage was good. One game which sticks out in my mind was when we beat Aston Villa 3-2 at Highbury. Paul Merson, of course, was captaining Villa, and he came back to Arsenal, of course, and he gave them the lead. Steve Stone made it 2-0 before half time. We looked almost dead and buried, but then at half time, Wenger made the decision to bring on Martin Keown and Sylvain Wiltord, and then we got a few goals back, and Henry of course, got the winner and made it 3-2, leaving Merson a bit dejected, but obviously in awe of our bounce back ability. And that really, that one game epitomized just how spirited we were that season. Whenever we lost at home, whether it was to Leeds United at the beginning, against Charlton somewhat midway, and then against Newcastle around about Christmas time, it was a disappointment, but we never seemed to lose that belief that we could come back and win. And obviously the 2-0 win at Newcastle was very satisfying because, gaining revenge over them was something, we needed, and I'm glad we got it that time. So that'll answer your question. So 91 would be my first favorite, but just marginally behind would be 2002. 2004, ironically, was not a season where I could watch very much because we were also moving around a lot. And of course, that was also the last time we won the league. I'd say 2014, the FA Cup, watching it on a closed circuit TV in a lounge at university was also really good in terms of, just watching it over there and having a few mates come in and going out and celebrating afterwards. And then, of course, 2017 was similar when we won then, and I went out with a mate of mine to a pub and we had a few pints and some snacks, and it was terrific. But 91 and 2002 would probably be my two best memories. 2002, of course, because that wasn't long after I resumed watching it again and kept watching. So I'm sorry for waffling on, but I hope that answers your question. I do like to go in depth.
It's interesting, Manny, and please, everyone, make sure you go and follow Manny on his Instagram account, Mani Thangaduri 1981. Also, make sure you follow him on Threads and Twitter as well, and make sure you go and check him out on when he's guesting on these other YouTube channels that he gets involved in. He's usually on the Del Boy Gunner fan can calling show that happens after every Arsenal game. And he's on, as you heard, he's on Coach's Corner as well, and a few other ones. So make sure you go and check him out. The guy is very knowledgeable and he speaks very passionately about football and many other sports as well. So, Manny, looking at Arsenal down the years, you've seen a few managers in your time. You've seen, obviously, George Graham, Arsene Wenger, and the current incumbent, and Unai Emery. Who do you think Arsenal's greatest ever manager has been?
There can only be one, George Graham. Because greatness will be, of course, determined by the culture that you inculcate at Arsenal, and how you're able to win the big prizes a lot more consistently. And don't get me wrong, in the first 10 years of Wenger's reign with us, he was outstanding, and the football that we played was magnificent. But when things started to stagnate, he should have taken more steps to, address that. And the fact that he didn't seem too eager to, or in a hurry to do so, was something which never sat well with me. And Emery had some promise, but in his second season, obviously results dictated that he had to go. As far as the current incumbent is concerned, he's already overstayed his welcome. And it angers me that the same standards that were applied to Unai Emery are not being applied to this current incumbent. So, I mean, it's George Graham all the way. And I respect Wenger for what he did for us. 2 League and Cup doubles, the Invincible season, and 5 more FA Cup trophies. But the lack of European silverware and the fact that teams started to, dismiss us near the end of his time, I think that is something which has, tainted his legacy with us a little bit.
100%. I couldn't put it any better myself, mate. Okay, so moving on, you've spoke quite a lot about international football as well at the beginning, and I found that fascinating because I didn't realise you were so into it. I knew that you had an inkling you did, because I remember once talking to you about the 1978 World Cup, which was a national disaster as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, so when you're watching international football, right, Manny, I'm assuming, I mean, you spoke really passionately about watching the England team in 1990 and so on and so forth. And how why is it, do you think? So no, I'm not going to ask it that way. I'm going to ask you how you feel about this current England team.
It's as if every single tournament we seem to do quite well and get a little bit better, but we just can't really get through. And I would say that one of the things which I loved so much about the Italia 90s side was that was played in an era where footballers were not as heavily paid as they are now. And the epitome of that, of course, was our Italia 90 captain, Terry Butcher. It was originally Brian Robson, but sadly that poor fellow was injured and had to go home. I'm sure you'll remember only too well how he played a qualifier with a head injury and ended up having his head bandaged, but still coming out, blood still coming out. He still came back onto the field and played. I don't quite remember watching that qualifier, but you could see back then that the players enjoyed playing for their country. They loved playing for the badge, and international football at the time meant something, because in as much as they did care about club football, international football was where they would earn a lot of exposure. And certainly with Gascoigne at his youthful peak, you could see how much playing for England meant to him. And that was the same in Euro 96 as well. I just think that as time has gone by, especially with the advent of the Premier League and more money being put into the game and players' salaries being a lot more inflated, people just don't seem to care that much about playing for the country. And I will accept that under Southgate, our tournament results have been pretty good. World Cup semi-final, European Championship final, only for the quarterfinal in Qatar to, just put a dampener on things. Graham Taylor was a disaster, it has to be said. Terry Venables got our hopes up. Glenn Hoddle was a bit of a disappointment. And after that, Eriksson had an improvement, but you could see he was never going to take us any further. The less said about the Italian Sergeant Major, the better. Don't get me started on the Wally with the Brolly, Steve McLaren. And I do not want to talk about Roy Hodgson. And Allardyce came and went. Yes, as time has gone by, the players have not really been have not really shown that they're really willing to wear their heart on their sleeve when it comes to playing international football. And maybe for some players, it doesn't really seem to affect them that much. But I'd also say that ever since Bobby Robson, God rest his soul, um, resigned as England manager because obviously he deserved better than the negative press attention that he was getting. We never really seemed to have a manager who also epitomized what it was like to represent England and really inspire us to do really well. I think Terry Venables was a much better England manager than club manager any day of the week. And Hoddle was someone who was a fine player, but had a lot of, I want to say, bitterness and recriminations inside of him. I think if memory serves me right, and I know you do enjoy delving into conspiracy theories, Hoddle actually dropped him after Euro 88 and brought Paul Gascoigne in to replace him. So that might have been one of the reasons why Gascoigne and Hoddle never really saw eye to eye for the most part. And eventually, as much as Hoddle might have tried to accommodate him, things just weren't able to work between the two of them, and Gaza ended up missing out on playing in France 98. But Hoddle wasn't a saint as a manager, believe you me. And some of his dealings really left players wondering, what the heck is this guy on about? And I still love watching England play, don't get me wrong. But I think the players also need to realize just how fortunate they are, but managers also have to realize how lucky they are to have a squad of players to call on, and also try and give more players opportunity to showcase their skills and also be fair in selection. We're not seeing that with Southgate. We haven't seen that with too many managers in the recent past. And managers also can cause a team to fall down. And I'm glad you mentioned the 78 World Cup. I actually read about that in this book called The Match of My Life, where the broadcaster Archie Macpherson was describing that entire campaign. And that was how I got to know about it, really. He was telling us about how the qualification campaign was quite successful. And the thing about it is that whenever we have teams from the home union, from the home countries or the British Isles competing in these tournaments, we all get together and support one another. And in that game between Scotland and Holland, I believe Macpherson was sitting next to David Coleman and Hugh Johns, the Englishman and the Welshman. Everybody was getting behind Scotland that time, and it was quite wonderful. But he also described the campaign, losing to Peru, scraping an own goal with Iran, the drugs business with Willie Johnston. And then when they knew that they had to beat Scotland by 3 clear goals, there wasn't a lot of confidence back home. And I believe Ron Greenwood, it was him who said, Scotland shouldn't have much to worry about. At least they know what to do. Beat Holland by 3 clear goals. And one Scottish journalist said, in his own words, "To hell with that, mate. What do you mean how can you talk about beating Holland when we cannot even beat you?" And that was in reference to England beating Scotland at Hampden Park before Scotland left to go to Argentina. So that's another thing which it always sticks in my memory. About I also love reading football literature, and that's one of my favorite books. And that was how I knew about it. With international football, you don't get necessarily the remuneration that you want, certainly not at that time. But the passion for playing for your country is more and more evident. And sometimes you don't get that in club football because players know that they can just come and turn up and do whatever they have to do, pick up their pay packet and go home and play Fortnite like Mesut Ozil did. Yeah, with the international football, you don't get to do that.
No, and this is what I don't understand. A lot of fans, even ones of my generation and older, who sort of look down their nose on international football, I just don't understand it. Do you know what I mean? I don't. I just think it's a bit weird that they don't want to. I don't know. I just don't understand it. So I'm going to move on. So I'm going to ask you this question now. It might seem a bit off key, but it's an interesting question, right? So I want you to imagine this scenario, okay? You're going, you have the opportunity to go to a bar for a few drinks, and you can take up to 5 football people with you, right, to sit with you, and they spend the evening with you. You share a few laughs and a few jokes, tell stories, and that. And these people can either be people that are dead or alive, right, past or present. I want you to tell us who those 5 people would be.
Oh, a bit like the dinner guests question, which I get quite a lot. That would be wonderful. The sad part is some of these people who I might recommend are now teetotal, so bringing them to a pub would not be the best idea
No, it doesn't
unless I
matter
can
about
offer them.
just sitting down at a table and having a chat with them about football.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't matter if they
I
talk
mean,
football or not.
yeah, I mean, obviously a glass of Ribena or sparkling water would do them just fine. So, Jimmy Greaves would be one of them because I enjoyed watching him as a broadcaster. I know, obviously, he made his name with Tottenham, but for me, I'm always country over club. And if a person, does well for England, he is definitely a legend in my book. And he's also had the biggest, life story to tell, a lot of ups and downs. And he'd just be a wonderful person to, have a meal with, at least. And you see him whenever I would watch him on Saint and Greavesy on ITV. You'd see him in his element, cheeky chappy, as it were, London boy, I think, and he was in his element. And it was obviously the Scotsman and the Englishman combining together, an odd couple, but they worked magic. And I'd have Jimmy Greaves as one of my guests any day of the week and twice on the Sunday. Another guest, ooh. I have 5, right?
Yeah, you've got 5.
Brilliant. So that's 1 down. I think my second guest with the Arsenal connection would arguably be Tony Adams.
Mm-hmm.
I've spoken to him actually when I was with my friend Gary Walker in Palm Beach. He got me to talk to him, and speaking to him was really a huge highlight. If I do get to meet him one day, I think my bucket list will be complete in a way. And he also is a gentleman who has a wonderful story to tell, without any doubt. 3, Paul Gascoigne. How he's still been afflicted by his demons, but we still remember him for the moments of joy he gave us on the field, and how he, charmed and inspired the nation. If he had someone like an Alex Ferguson managing him at club level, he'd have stayed on the straight and narrow. I don't think he would have even gone to Italy, and things would have been okay. But at the end of the day, ifs and buts, sweets and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. So,
Exactly.
yeah. So I've mentioned Jimmy Greaves, Tony Adams, and Paul Gascoigne, right?
Yeah.
So 2 left. That is a really tough, loaded question. I know you were preparing me for this. I wish I'd, prepared, but I do have a thing in mind. Yes, Emiliano Martinez. Currently, my favorite goalkeeper in world football today. Always a part of Arsenal's history with his FA Cup win. He came to England not knowing a word of English, but developed himself and became a man with us, developed his game with us, and should have gone on to become a legend, but the current incumbent didn't rate him, sent him away to Aston Villa. A fat lot of good it did us, because the rest is history. But I remember watching an interview he did with Ben Foster, the ex-England and United Watford keeper. He has his own podcast, of course, the Cycling GK.
Yeah,
and watching and seeing him articulate himself quite brilliantly, you just think, what a guy he is. People think of him as some sort of an arrogant so-and-so and a bit of a crap houser who, rubs people the wrong way and can be an absolute git at times. But off the field, like most of them, he's a really, really, really top bloke. And you can't go too far with him. And another one my final one would be, Ah, yes. It's a tough one, and I have to choose between two really good people, both of whom are, equally worthy. Michael Joseph McCarthy, Mick. Um, he was, of course, Ireland's captain at Italia 90 when they reached the quarterfinals. Yorkshire-born Irishman from Barnsley, and also managed the team in 2002. Definitely one with a story to tell. Always known as the man who sent Roy Keane. Always known as the man who sent Roy Keane home. But someone obviously who had an upbringing in the game where he was able to appreciate, the working class nature of the game at the time, how important it was to respect his peers and his teammates and be a part of the crack, and also how much international football meant to him. I believe his father was on his deathbed, and this was a few days before Ireland was supposed to play an international game. And it was Charlie McCarthy actually who had moved to Barnsley from Ireland, and it was agreed that Mick would go and play with the Irish team, and Mick also missed out on being the best man on his brother's wedding to go and play for his country. So what angers me a great deal is that there's still a pro-Keane lobby in Ireland that considers people like McCarthy and Steve Staunton and Niall Quinn as snakes and traitors for their role in getting their golden boy Keane sent home, which is absolutely unfair because these three names that I've mentioned have been brilliant servants to the Irish cause. And another reason why I was having to choose between McCarthy and Staunton is because I remember watching Staunton at Liverpool, and he was absolute quality. And if you remember, I wanted him to be our left back in that All-Ireland team based on his international accomplishments, his leadership qualities, the versatility he lent to the team. But with a 2-2 tie, you broke the tie by saying Dennis Irwin gets in because he was just a nightmare to play against for Manchester United. The ironic thing is that Irwin never played a single game at left back for Ireland. But McCarthy had to bear a lot of that brunt, and he didn't deserve any of that. And yet he took everything in his stride with good humor. And of course, when he managed Ireland, he was replacing the iconic Jack Charlton, who oversaw an overachieving team which had started to decline a bit. And when they failed to qualify for Euro 96 in England, I think that was the time that Jack left, and there were still several remnants of the Charlton reign still playing. McCarthy had to start phasing them out. And it was difficult, he said, because he knew them closely. He was good mates with them, and they were teammates. But he did things his own way. He introduced a new style. And when I take a look at everything in summation, he's just a person who I'd really like to get to know. And obviously, as a Yorkshireman, he tells it to you straight. But if you treat him with respect, he's good company, like most other Yorkshiremen are. So hopefully, sir, that answers your question. Oops, Warren. So Jimmy Greaves, Tony Adams, Paul Gascoigne, Emiliano Martinez, Mick McCarthy.
What a selection. Fantastic choices there, Manny. So,
thank you.
Moving forward now, I want to move forward, and I want us to discuss this current season that's just kicked off. Right? How do you think the team's going to end up doing that? Where do you think we're finishing the league? And do you think there'll be any cups, any successes in any of the cup tournaments that we're involved in this season?
No success in the Champions League. Forget about that. Mm-hmm. In as much as people keep saying that we have an easier group than expected, PSV and Sevilla are not going to be pushovers. I know that PSV have let a couple of their players go, including the defensive midfielder Sangare, who's moved to slum it at Nottingham Forest. And Sevilla have also let Gonzalo Montiel go to Forest. Why they'd want to abandon the Champions League in favour of playing in the Premier League at a mid-table / lower table club will always boggle my mind. Maybe it's all about the pay packet. But these teams are always going to be quite difficult to play in Europe. Our away record in Europe under Arteta has not been great. We played PSV last season, the Europa League, and didn't do and lost. We couldn't even beat Sporting Lisbon. And going to Spain to play any team is always going to be a difficult affair. So we can rule out the Champions League. As far as the FA Cups are concerned, what angers me a great deal, Warren, is that he's now overseen quite a few players getting injured. We've lost Timber. We've now lost Thomas Partey for a few months. And so he feels more and more inclined to experiment, but in reality, and I use experiment with the inverted commas, in reality, he's just playing this inverted style, which you and I both despise. It's just one way football, and it really is stupid at times. And people can talk to me and say, but we're playing such amazing attacking football, which is the envy of everyone in the league. We've got these wonderful XG stats and everything. But as you said, the only stat that matters is how many goals were scored at the end of the day by either team. And that is how the best way to describe the Fulham game. We might have had the better stats, but we only got 1 point out of it. It's as simple as that. And so as far as the Premier League is concerned, the way we're going, I know that it's early, it's very early in the season, and a lot of people will say that City are due a slump, given that they haven't really been tested as of yet. But you take a look at how Liverpool have recovered under Jurgen Klopp. You take a look at how Spurs have seemed to have started well under Ange Postecoglou. Obviously, Chelsea is still floundering, but they could get things together, or maybe they won't. But unless we sort out our situation with our squad depth, and we've had an absolutely shambolic window, we may get lucky against some easier teams. But now that we've got the likes of Spurs and Manchester City coming to play us, we're going to have litmus tests at the very beginning. And I'm going to say this right now. If we fail to win either of those two games, we can kiss our chances of winning the league goodbye. And last season, the only reason why City was struggling was because several of their internationals were focused heavily on the World Cup, which was taking place in December. As soon as the World Cup got over, they came back, they were focused, they were hungry, and they were just relentless in their march to the title. And they didn't just pip us like they pipped Liverpool that year. They finished top of the league with a fairly healthy margin as we completely faded away. So in the Premier League, unless we get our act together, we will struggle to make the top four. I predict we'll finish fourth, which means Champions League football for another season of somehow qualifying from the group stage by hook or crook, only to get battered in the latter stages of the tournament. Whoopee.
No, so what about the FA Cup and the League Cup as well, Manny?
I am coming to that. Knowing Arteta as well as we do, he will probably play a reserve team in the League Cup, and we will end up, getting it handed to us. Maybe to his credit, he'll decide to play David Raya in goal instead of Aaron Ramsdale. Thankfully, Alex Runarsson isn't there, and I wouldn't trust Carl Hein, to be honest. But again, we seem, ever since the FA Cup win, which all of these Arteta in people like to crow about, our record in the domestic cups has been absolutely poor. And I don't see it improving. If we're lucky, we could possibly make the semi-finals of the League Cup, but I definitely do not see us going further than the quarter-final or the fifth round stage of the FA, or the sixth round stage of the FA Cup. So that should answer your question. It'll be another season of disappointment.
Yeah, 100% it does. Thank you very much for that, Manny. So in order for you to regard this current season as being a success, what do you think? What do you think the team needs to do?
You mean to improve?
No.
Well,
for you to be able to say, yeah, that was a successful season.
I think it's a moot question, to be honest, because I don't see us, improving on the second place finish. And the only way that we can improve on a second place finish would be to win the league. But that won't happen. And I've got a couple of friends of mine in a WhatsApp group chat who keep taking the mickey out of me, saying, you should be happy to have Arteta. He's done great things for you, and I believe that you will win the league. I've told them, boys, it's not going to happen. And they're not even Arsenal fans, by the way. They're just taking the mickey out of me at times. And
when they say that, ask them whether they'd like to have him as their manager. Because I can guarantee you they'll say no.
Ooh, here's the thing, though. One of them in question is a fan of Paris Saint-Germain, and he remembers Unai Emery from his time there. Obviously, I believe they won the league and the French Cup, but the 6-1 reverse at the Nou Camp against Barcelona is still quite fresh in his mind. But so maybe there is some bias there. I don't know. And so the only way we can have a successful season is if we win either the Premiership or the Champions League. If we do drop down into the Europa League, there'll be no excuses if we don't win that. I don't care if other teams might be favoured to win, like Liverpool or what have you.
If we drop down into that Europa League, mate, he will bin it. Particularly if we're like struggling to finish in the top 4, or we're going for you're in a title chase, he will definitely bin it. He will not give it.
Bigger fish to fry and all that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry, Manny. Go on, carry on.
Don't worry. Thank you very much indeed. And so as I've said, he has to win either the Premiership or the Champions League, and we won't win the Champions League, not with teams of the caliber of Bayern Munich and Real Madrid, and also Manchester City very much in contention. I mean, we can kiss that goodbye. And in the FA Cups as well, unless he gets his act together and plays some players fairly, we're not going to get anywhere. And that is where his man management really angers me, because several of the players who helped him win the FA Cup are now no longer with us. And many of those players, mind you, were actually decent players. Emi Martinez, Kieran Tierney. Nicola Pepe has had his contract terminated. He's on his way to Besiktas. So he's tried to, enforce a new style, and he's been very harsh in his dealings with several of his players, and he's frozen them out in many ways. It's poor man management. His refusal to adopt a different style of play has meant that Kieran Tierney would never get a look in, and giving him a few seconds of a substitute appearance would be was just sacrilegious at times. Yeah. So it's his man management that will cost us in the cups as well, because even if we were to proceed even further, we will obviously get a top team against us. And, they're going to be motivated, obviously, to try and win. And we're just not going to be able to overcome the mental block that has seemed to fall over us when we go to that stage of a cup. At least when we won in 2020, you could say that was not long after Emery got fired. Sadly, but it had to happen. We probably had nothing to lose, and of course, Bernd Leno's injury brought Emi Martinez in. He made the defense a lot more solid, and he was one of the catalysts of our win, along with Aubameyang. And how we didn't build on that success, that's always going to be very much on Arteta. And I can never support him. I can never really support him unless he proves me wrong by winning something.
This is the thing. He fluked that FA Cup win. How we managed to get through that game at Sheffield, I've got no idea. Right? I just don't understand how we managed to get through that game. The semi-final against Man City. The final against Chelsea, they lost their best player to an injury. It was just a catalogue of fortunate incidents that led to him being able to win it. And as you quite rightly said, like the way he treated the players that won him that FA Cup, the one you didn't mention was the one that kept scoring goals for him, was Aubameyang.
I mean, look, it goes without saying that Aubameyang was badly treated, and the more we know about that, the more we start to realise that Aubameyang didn't really put too much wrong. But Go ahead. Keep speaking, Warren.
No,
Thank you.
because like he scored goals in the semi-final. He scored goals in the final, or both of the goals I think he scored in the final.
Yes.
And then he gets him to sign a new contract, and then proceeds to start playing him at left wing back. The guy at the time when he did that was one of the best strikers in the world, and you're asking to play left wing back. I don't understand it, Manny. I don't understand the man's thought processes. You've got a guy who's lethal in front of goal, and then you're asking him to play a left wing back role.
Couldn't agree more.
Absolute lunacy of the highest order. It is. It's absolutely ridiculous. It'd be like asking someone, like say in the middle of winter, it's about -2 outside, snowing, asking someone to go walk down the road in a bikini.
Yeah.
I mean, what are you doing? Honestly, mate, the decisions that he makes for me are absolutely baffling. But anyway, sorry, I'm interrupting you again.
No. Please don't apologize for that. And I don't want to talk too much about Arteta, but hopefully that answers your question.
No,
he has
it does.
to win. He has to win a major trophy.
Yeah,
and even if he were to win the League Cup or the FA Cup, all that's going to do is paper over more of the cracks and just buy him a little bit of time.
Exactly.
What angers me as well, though, is that forget about Arteta. This misconception that people have that guys like you and myself are only too happy to see the team fail because we want to have that feeling of being proven right rather than seeing the team win and accept that we were wrong. It's disgusting because
For me, mate, I want to go on record and say this, and I know I'm going to get a lot of stick for it, right? There is an argument for short-term pain for long-term gain, right? And I would be happy knowing that we were going to get a decent manager in, and I would be happy to go through a bit of pain this season if I knew he was going to be sacked and then we were going to get someone else in. It's got nothing to do with wanting to be proved right or wanting to be proved wrong. I want what is best for this football club in the long term, and it isn't him, right?
Exactly.
He is destroying this club.
Yes.
He should never have ever been appointed, and if we have to lose, in the Champions League, we have to lose in the FA Cup, we don't win the league, right? And all of that. If it means we can then go and get a proper manager who's going to get this team consistently challenging for the major honours, right? I'm not even saying winning. Yeah, of course I want them to win. But if he's going to consistently, season after season after season, have us challenging and behave and respecting the traditions and culture of this football club, because that's another bit of it for me, the disrespect that this man has shown to the way that Arsenal Football Club always used to do their business. It always got held up as an example of the way things should be done. It's not like now. And that angers me. So if short-term pain for long-term gain, that is my thing at the moment. If we perform badly this season or don't perform as well as we did last year and he ends up getting sacked, which he should do after spending near on £750 million, right? Then as long as we're going to get in a top quality, top tier, elite level manager who is going to transform this club back to the way it was. And this has got something to do with the owners as well, but I'm not going to go on and on, right? then
I agree.
I'll be happy to accept it. But sorry,
Yeah.
Manny, go on.
Yeah. So as I said, that answers the question. Either win the Premiership or resign. Because I have no confidence in his ability to win the Champions League. That is not even a question. I do not see him doing well in the Cups. So if he doesn't win the Premiership, he has to go. Anything, especially if it's anything less than that, finishing second is not an improvement. Finishing third or fourth is a decline. And if he finishes out of the Champions League places, says it all.
Well, mate, to be honest with you, I'd sack him. I'd sack him now. Do you know what I mean? I'd sack him now. He should have been appointed. He shouldn't have been appointed. He should have been sacked after that failed attempt to get into the top four. He should have been sacked last season when we capitulated right at the end of the season, and numerous other times throughout the time he's been here for some of the stunts he's pulled. It is an absolute disgrace in my opinion. Anyway, so Manny, if you could change one thing at Arsenal, what would it be? Just one thing.
Change one thing.
Now, this is a difficult one, right? So I want you to really think about this, right? You could change one thing, what would it be? Because for me, it wouldn't be Arteta, right? But what would your answer to that question be?
It's a difficult one because if there's one thing I can think, that has to be changed, it would at least help us avoid a situation where players start to have a decline in their performances. The only problem is that proposal can't happen for various reasons. I'd like to see a salary cap. The reason why I say this is because it's no coincidence, Warren, that ever since we had signed Ozil and Aubameyang to those contracts, obviously Ozil's performance has declined. There were a lot of issues with Aubameyang. Yes, his performances had started to decline, but he also had a lot of personal issues as well, and things just weren't really working out with him. And the biggest fear that I have now is that having signed Saka to that new deal and also getting Havertz on that bumper salary, we're still not seeing the performances from Havertz, and Saka's performances have also declined a bit. The biggest problem with having a salary cap would be this claim that if you're living in London, which is quite expensive, you can't just ask players to subsist rather on a lower salary. But I would argue that if you have a salary cap, you'd guarantee that players would want to try and perform a little bit better. It would save a great deal of money for the club in terms of being able to buy some more players. And at least that way, you wouldn't have a situation where players would take their spots in the team for granted because they know that even if they drop a stinker, they'll collect their pay packet and go home. But another thing that would be changed is making sure that there'd be a compulsory audit of the club at least twice a season to make sure the finances are in order. Because I think you've said it, you don't even know what's going on with the finances of the club if some questionable activity is taking place. And if that club is subject to a lot more in terms of control a lot of how do I say this? A lot of scrutiny externally. At least they'd be, forced to become a little bit more accountable. And under Wenger, we were a fiscally efficient unit, turning in profit after profit and spending money wisely. But then it all changed near the end of his time, and now we seem to be losing money every single transfer window and paying for certain things we don't really need. And I mean, as you and other people would say, it's an absolute shambles, and we don't even know how to address that and where exactly the money is going and how the money is being spent. So maybe that answers your question. Two things to be changed, both on the financial side of it.
So out of the two of them, which one would be your priority? Because the question was one thing, so I want you to pick one of them.
Oh,
I know I'm
okay.
being
So
really pernickety and harsh,
no,
but
no, 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 no.
everyone else I've asked this to
You
has had to
no.
give me one.
You have a right to be. You have a right to be, and I shouldn't try to skirt around the question.
No, it's
So
fine, mate. I'm glad you mentioned both of them because they are big issues. The one problem I've got with the salary cap is that I know damn well that it would be an exit door. It would open an exit door to Saudi Arabia for one. Like Saka and all the other ones who are on top salaries. If you suddenly turn around and said 100 grand a week salary cap, the Saudi clubs would come knocking. Yeah, Mr. Saka, we can give you 500,000 a week. There you go, Arsenal. There's 25 million for him, something like that, because he has got a release clause in his contract. I think it's about
yes,
120 million.
yes,
Some real
yes,
crazy, like low price for a player of his quality. And I
yeah.
just fear that by doing that, having a salary cap, the all our top players will be creamed off to other leagues. Not just Saudi Arabia, but like, Germany, Italy, the Italian league's on the rise, you know, and back in the day, they were a real powerhouse of world football. They were the best team, had the best teams in the world.
Oh yes,
Maradona
Ace.
in
Yep.
Napoli, and any top player usually ended up playing in Italy, and it was because their teams were sponsored or financially supported by Fiat or whatever, and sometimes more um, dubious financial arrangements with rather dubious organisations that are well known in Italy. But less said about that, the better. I don't want
Oh
to
yeah.
find a head next to me on the festival.
Exactly. So with the salary cap, I wasn't going to be crass and suggest it would be 100 grand a week because that's what a certain Mr. Nketiah earns. And you see that there are different levels between the Bukayo Saka and an Edward Nketiah. So I'm not even going to suggest that Saka be brought down to that level. Far from it. Somewhere like a 200,000 cap would be good. But as
Mate,
you said,
I don't think it matters how much it is. The fact that
yeah.
you're going to say to people that they can have their salaries capped, right? And then you've got like literally like 6-7 hour flight away. You've got a country that is able to offer unlimited financial rewards to footballers is a massive concern for me. If I just think it would be like um, absolute football suicide to do that. But fair play to you, mate. If that you think it would work, I'd be all for it. If it could work, I'll be all for it because I don't think it's helping, but I think it could see a massive exodus from the Premier League if it was brought in, and if it was done just at Arsenal, then we would definitely struggle to bring in top quality talent.
it could be the case. Yeah. So you have a point. So I think that probably narrows down my options to the independent audit twice a year. I think
Yeah.
that would be that would be the only thing because financially we're a complete mess, and at least if everything is sorted well on the top and there's no jiggery pokery or any kind of nonsense going on, that's not going to filter down to the way the club is being managed by the board and also on the field. So yeah, have that done and sort everything out and punish those people who are engaging in that kind of irregularity and at least clean out the stables. The fish always rots from the head down, as we say.
Exactly. And final question, mate. Right. What looking forward for the rest of this season, what do you think is the most positive thing that fans can have to look forward to?
You mean from an Arsenal point of view, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Ooh, boy. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. Well, I remember telling you, Warren, that nothing succeeds like success. Because it is success that can at least, bring the fan base together and say, regardless of our differences, at least our club is successful. But my apologies for that. I thought I kept it on silent, but I didn't.
It's fine.
And but one thing which I can also say is that I remember during the last days of Wenger's era, when things were going terribly, the fans also came to a conclusion that this had to end. So they realized that, the emperor had no clothes and that he had to eventually go. But one positive I can see is that regardless of the result, if people start to come together and realize that the direction of the club is going in is either, the direction they like or that they don't like, that they start to come together and realize that regardless of our personal differences, the club is important. And so if people come to realization, hopefully in your case, that things aren't going well and Arteta has to leave and that has to be changed, then that will at least bring the fan base together. And at least the fans will start to realize that the emperor has no clothes, as I keep saying, and say, you know what? We can't have any more of this. We're being sold a horse and being delivered a donkey. And that's just simply not acceptable. So hopefully that positive will be the fans start to unite, whether for something good or something bad. Because if the fan base continues to be divided, then we can never find any of that common ground, and we're still going to have a great deal of animosity.
Exactly. And my big fear about that is that if, say, for example, the club did decide to sack Arteta, right, in whoever they brought in, right, dare say they brought in, I don't know, Carlo Ancelotti, which isn't going to happen because he's about to take up the Brazilian national team job. But dare say we got in a serial winner, someone who had a incredible CV of track record of success, right? I can pretty much guarantee I think I know what will happen. And the scenario that I fear will play out is the new manager will not be given a chance by all these fans that have been so invested and brainwashed into accepting the nonsense that's been going on at this club for the last 4 years with this, joke of a manager that we currently have, right? They will criticize him for everything and hound him out of the club because the reason they would do it is because it's not Arteta, right? Then we'll have a scenario, a new guy will come in, he'll be the greatest thing since sliced bread, even if he's completely, is completely not the right choice as a manager. It won't matter. And then we'll go on this never-ending cycle of this constant conflict of one group of fans backing one manager, another group of fans demanding that the other manager is sacked. And I feel quite pessimistic about that because I have no confidence in our fan base at all. I think half of them aren't here supporting the club because they actually love the club. I think they're here, a lot of them, just because they want to be seen at the ground, right? It's a bit like for a lot of people when they go to the theatre or the opera, they go there because they want to be seen to be there. And I think it's like that with a lot of Arsenal fans. And I do believe that a lot of our fans on social media are Arsenal fans because they think the club, people who have social media accounts who are Arsenal fans and they're positive about the club, so-called positive, I call it toxic and negative, right? In that way, because they know they're going to get a lot of traction and they're going to get a big following. and that's why they're doing it. It's not anything to do with whether they love the club or they want the club to be successful. That is a minor point. It doesn't even come into the equation. It's all about me and what's right for me. That concerns me. It really does, and that I'm hoping I'm wrong, but I could see that keep playing out, because this is what happened with Unai Emery. None of our fans gave him a chance, right? People like dancing in the stadium and cheering when we were losing that game against near the end of his reign, when we were losing games at home. People dancing and cheering when opposition teams were scoring against us. Yet we get this new guy coming, Arteta, and he was breaking negative records left, right, and centre. And the amount of excuses and BS that was coming out about him and about why we should give him more time. But where was all this energy for Unai Emery? Mate, it worries me. It really does. But anyway, Manny, I've really enjoyed talking to you today, mate. So,
Me too.
Before you go, I just want you to leave the viewers with something positive about the club. And then also, I want you to shout out all your socials and where people can find you and your various channels, if you'd like to do that for me, if you don't mind.
Definitely, thank you. Will do. The positive thing I will say about Arsenal is that we have a proud history, and the more that our fans know about the history of our club, what it stands for, and the values that we espoused at the time, and the trouble that we took that was taken to bring the club to the level that it is at now, not just from recent history, but from all the way back, the better off we will all be as a fan base. And we all have to be willing to learn and be willing to be open-minded. And as I keep saying, as I've said twice, I think, during this broadcast, it's all about being willing to learn and being more open-minded and willing to listen to people like yourself, Warren, and Jez Collins, and Darren Sullivan, and Kenny Ken, Del Boy Gunner, Kyle Walsh. All those people have had great histories, including you, of watching Arsenal since you were children, learning more about the history. You never claim to be experts, but you always are willing to. You've always been great students, and unless you are willing to be a good student, you cannot in any way be a good teacher. And of course, ironically, the more you teach, the more you learn, as people would say. In learning, you can teach, and in teaching, you can learn. That's sort of like a circle, as it were. So hopefully, if we can all be more willing to learn and teach at the same time, then we will be better off as a fan base, and we will not be so divided. And division is definitely what will set the fan base even further back. It's a bit like how to be a politician. You can't just learn about, your partisan politics. You've got to have a basic grounding in economics and history and world affairs, and learn about a lot of the things that have made nations and the world what they are. That gives you a solid base to become a better person, and knowing about the history of the game and the history of our club will make us better fans, and I hope that'll happen for all of us. As to where you can find me on social media, Warren has very kindly put the link to my Instagram handle in the description. That is where you can find me. You can also find me on Threads with that same ID. A word of caution, though, if you want to look me up on Twitter, I go by Thangaduri 1981, which is my surname and my year of birth. But if you type Mani Thangaduri, you'll see my profile picture on the top left and right corners. You'll also see the profile picture, which has the UK flag, the India flag, the Ukraine and Palestinian flags. You can't miss me, and you'll see that Warren and I follow each other. So that should help you out. And do catch me elsewhere on YouTube where I talk quite a bit. And one thing which I always say is that we have to be respectful of one another, learn to disagree without being disagreeable. I know that occasionally when it comes to, airing our views, whether, in group chats or even on YouTube, sometimes we can be a little bit, rough with our language. But I always try to be a little bit, I wouldn't say polished, but definitely a lot more reserved, a lot more polite, and just try and say things deliberately without having to use that sort of language. This isn't a slight against anyone, by the way. And I also, no matter what, try to make sure that I'm respectful towards people, but I do not like people trying to cut in and interrupt me. And again, Warren, nothing against you. You wanted to say everything what you want to say. This is not against you. I've seen a lot of people on some other streams who try to dominate the conversation, who try to cut right in when people are talking and try and make their own points heard without being cognizant of what other people want to say. But you definitely are not like that. And I always try to make sure everyone gets heard. So we need to learn to agree to disagree without being disagreeable. Otherwise, there's no point in having a discussion. Let's keep things respectful. That's always what I say. And with Warren, I always keep things respectful. He does the same thing with me. And I would like to echo what he said when I say it's been an enjoyable experience, an absolute privilege and an honor to be a part of this series. And I hope that if people watch this and enjoy this, I know it's going to go on for the best part of 3 hours, but I only hope that you won't get bored by what I have to say and you'll enjoy the conversations that Warren and I have had. Thank you all.
It's an absolute pleasure. And once again, Manny, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it. It's been a great chat. And like Manny said, this has been a great show and I hope you enjoy it. Yeah, you'll be able to see us again soon. And take care, everyone. Thanks ever so much for watching. And as I always say, please remember to take care of yourselves, your friends, your families, and your loved ones. Share some love and kindness around the world. And as I always say on the work I do on Diesel's channel, keep your eyes on the skies, especially at the moment, because there's big things happening in that area at the moment. And I'll be talking, hopefully next week, about something really major that's happening at the moment. So make sure you keep your eyes on the notifications and my Instagram and Diesel's Instagram as well, because it's absolutely massive. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Thanks ever so much to Mani. Make sure you go and follow him on Mani Thangaduri 1981. Also go and follow him on Twitter and Threads. Be careful about the slight differences with his name, but if you have any problems contacting him, you can always contact me and I'll tell you how to contact him, okay? So thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for watching and take care, everyone. Bye for now.
But, Brian, you know what they say? Some things in life are bad. They can really make you mad. Other things just make you swear and curse. When you're chewing on life's gristle, don't grumble, give a whistle. And this'll help things turn out for the best. And always look on the bright side of life. Always look on the light side of life. If life seems jolly rotten, there's something you've forgotten, and that's to laugh and smile and dance and sing. When you're feeling in the dumps, don't be silly chumps. Just purse your lips and whistle, that's the thing. And always look on the bright side of life. Come on. Always look on the right side of life. For life is quite absurd, and death's the final word. You must always face the curtain with a bow. Forget about your scene, give the audience a grin. Enjoy it, it's your last chance anyhow. So always look on the bright side of death. Just before you draw your terminal breath. Life's a piece of shit when you look at it. Life's a laugh and death's a joke, it's true. You'll see it's all a show, keep 'em laughing as you go. Just remember that the last laugh is on you. And always look on the bright side of life. Always look on the right side of life. Come on, Brian, get up. Always look on the right side of life. Always look on the right side of life. Worst things happen to see, you know. Always look on the right side. But what you got to lose? You know, you come from nothing, you go back to nothing. What you lost? Nothing. Look on the right side of life. Nothing will come from nothing.